good evening. Wherever you are listening from tonight, make yourself comfortable. Let the day loosen its hold on you. There is nowhere you need to hurry now, and nothing you need to prepare for the journey ahead. If these quiet journeys through the past bring you some peace, you can leave a like and subscribe to Human and Time. And then, with that small thing done, you may simply rest, because outside, somewhere very far from the room around you, it is beginning to rain. Not the rain of modern London, not rain shining beneath electric lamps, running over asphalt, or gathering beside the wheels of passing cars. This rain is falling more than 6 centuries ago. It is late autumn, near the end of the 14th century, and daylight is fading over London. You have not entered the city yet. Ahead of you, beyond the wet road and the dimming fields, the eastern wall rises beneath a heavy sky. It does not surround the vast London that will exist centuries from now. This is a much smaller place, a dense walled city of perhaps 40 to 50,000 people pressed against the northern bank of the Thames. And somewhere in that wall, waiting through the rain, is Aldgate. The road beneath your feet has darkened with water. Mud gathers where the ground is worn deepest, and every passing cart leaves another pair of grooves behind it. A horse moves slowly ahead, its hooves pressing into the softened earth, while the wooden wheels behind it turn with a low, wet grinding sound. The rain is not violent. It does not need to be. It has been falling long enough for the landscape to surrender to it. Wool darkens beneath the water. Leather grows damp. Drops collect along the edge of a hood before falling one by one. The cold has begun to find the spaces between clothing and skin, not painfully, but patiently, as autumn cold often does. And yet there is warmth ahead. You can already smell it. Wood smoke hangs above the approaching city, softened by rain and carried through the damp air. Somewhere beyond the wall, hearths are burning. Evening meals are being prepared. Candles are being lit. Shopkeepers are beginning to think about closing their shutters. The day is ending, and medieval London is changing with it. Aldgate grows larger as you approach. The gate is more than an opening in the wall. It is a threshold between two different rhythms of life. Beyond it lies the compressed world of the city houses, workshops, churches, markets, inns, lanes, yards, animals, merchants, apprentices, servants, priests, craftsmen, travellers. For now, however, all of that remains hidden. There is only the gate before you, and the sound of rain against timber and stone. Others are arriving too. A cart moves toward the entrance carrying goods protected as well as they can be beneath coverings. A traveller draws his cloak more closely around himself. Horses shift their weight in the wet road. People who have spent the day outside the walls are making their way inward before darkness settles completely over the city. There is reason not to linger. London does not simply remain open to the night. Its gates belong to a city that understands darkness differently from the world, you know. Movement after curfew can attract attention. Gates can be secured. The watch will have responsibilities once ordinary daytime movement has faded. But no single bell has yet transformed the evening into night. For now, people are simply going home, and you pass beneath Aldgate with them. The change is immediate. The road narrows into a world of timber and plaster. Buildings stand close to one another, their upper floors sometimes projecting outward above the street, reducing the strip of grey sky visible overhead. Rain reaches the roofs, runs toward their edges, and falls from eaves into the street below. There are no modern gutters carrying the water invisibly away. Here the rain remains part of the street. It gathers along channels. It follows the slope of the ground. It mixes with mud, straw, dirt, and the traces left behind by animals and carts. Where drainage is obstructed, shallow pools form. Feet search instinctively for firmer ground. A man ahead of you steps carefully along the wet street in raised wooden patterns, keeping his leather shoes a little farther from the worst of the mud. Another person is less fortunate. A wheel passes through a puddle. Water spreads outward. Nobody stops. London has lived with rain before. Above you, a wooden shop sign moves slightly in the wind. Water runs from its lower edge. Beneath it, an apprentice is closing the front of a shop for the evening, pulling wooden shutters into place while the last usable daylight disappears. The sound travels strangely through the narrow street. Wood against wood. A latch. Rain. Footsteps. Then another shutter closes farther ahead, and another. The city is not becoming silent, it is becoming interior. During daylight, life spills outward. Goods are displayed. Work reaches into the street. Voices cross open shop fronts. Carts and customers occupy the same narrow space. But evening draws all of this slowly inward. Behind one closing frontage, a merchant may soon turn toward accounts and household concerns. Behind another, an artisan's tools are being put aside. Somewhere above a workshop, children wait for food while wet clothing is brought nearer to a hearth. The streets lose one kind of life as the houses gain another. You continue westward. The route from Aldgate leads toward the commercial heart of the city, and even in the fading light, there are reminders that London is not an isolated medieval settlement. It is a place of exchange. Goods arrive here from the countryside and from beyond England. Merchants live among craftsmen. Money moves through markets and warehouses. The Thames, still unseen from where you walk, connects the city to a much larger world, but none of that appears as an explanation tonight. It appears as a smell, wet wool, smoke, leather, a trace of fish carried from somewhere farther south, then bread. For a moment, warm bread overwhelms everything else. It comes from an opening somewhere along the street, rich and ordinary, and it changes the cold evening completely. You do not need to see the loaf. The smell is enough. Perhaps that is how cities become familiar. Not through maps, not through walls or gates or names, but through small things repeated over thousands of evenings: bread near a fire, damp wool drying indoors, footsteps outside the door, rain tapping against a shutter. The people around you do not think of themselves as inhabitants of a vanished world. Nothing here is medieval to them. This is simply evening. A woman disappears through a doorway, carrying something beneath her cloak. A servant crosses a small yard with an enclosed lantern, protecting the flame from the rain. Its light is weak by modern standards, but in the gathering darkness it seems surprisingly warm. For a few moments the lantern illuminates wet timber. Then it is gone. Darkness returns behind it. This is how London will reveal itself tonight. Not all at once. In fragments of light, a candle behind a shutter, a hearth through an open doorway, a lantern moving down a lane, a church interior holding a few small flames against a much greater darkness. The night does not erase the city. It reduces it to islands, and as the sky deepens toward blue, grey above the roofs, those islands begin to appear. The rain continues. It strikes tile with a harder sound and settles more softly where other roofing materials absorb its touch. It runs from projecting upper stories and drips into the narrow spaces below. Somewhere water has found a wooden surface and begun a slow, hollow tapping. You pass beneath another overhanging floor. For a moment you are almost sheltered. The difference is small, but after so long in the rain it feels generous. There is a smell of damp plaster beside you, then smoke again, then something savory cooking beyond a wall. The city has perhaps 40 or 50,000 inhabitants, but numbers mean very little from inside it. You cannot see 40,000 people. You see one doorway, one horse, one tired apprentice, one candle. And perhaps this is the only scale on which a city can truly be understood. Human by human, window by window, evening by evening, farther west. The street begins drawing you toward Cornhill. The commercial centre lies ahead, though much of its daytime urgency is already fading. Traders who spent the day surrounded by voices and goods are preparing to leave the street to the rain. The light has become too poor for ordinary work to continue comfortably without flame, and flame costs something. Tallow candles are cheaper than beeswax, but even inexpensive light is not meaningless in a world where darkness arrives every evening and electricity will remain unimaginable for centuries. So people use light with purpose. A flame belongs where someone needs it, beside food, beside work, beside a bed. Outside, darkness is allowed to remain darkness. A bell begins somewhere beyond the roofs. Its first note reaches you through rain, then another. The sound is not clean. The weather softens its edges, and buildings interrupt its journey through the streets, but the bell remains unmistakable. Another church answers from somewhere else. London contains many parish churches, crowded among homes and businesses, their towers rising above neighbourhoods that measure belonging not only by streets, but by parishes. Tonight their bells do more than mark religious life. They give shape to invisible distance. A bell you cannot see tells you that another tower stands somewhere behind the roofs. Another parish, another cluster of houses, another collection of people preparing for night. The rain seems quieter while you listen, not because it has weakened, because your attention has moved. And when the bells fade, the rain is waiting underneath them, always there, soft against cloth, sharper against wood, whispering along the street. The last grey light continues draining from the sky as you move deeper into London and ahead. Beyond the wet roofs and closing shops, Cornhill waits in the gathering dark. The street opens a little as you move west, though the buildings still lean close enough to hold the darkness between them. Cornhill has not yet gone to sleep. A few figures remain beneath the projecting upper floors, finishing what the fading day has left unfinished. A wooden board is lifted from a stall. A bundle disappears through a doorway. Someone bends to move a basket away from the rain before pulling a shutter closed behind it. The gestures are small and practiced. They have been repeated through seasons of cold, heat, wind, and rain, until closing a shop requires almost no thought at all. Tonight the weather gives everyone another reason to finish quickly. Water threads its way down the street, following shallow channels and irregular slopes, gathering dirt and fragments of straw as it goes. The harder surfaces beneath your feet shine where they have been worn smooth by traffic. Elsewhere, Mud catches at pattens and leather soles with each step. A cart passes slowly enough that you hear every part of it. The iron-rimmed wheels make a dull clatter where they find firmer ground, then sink again into the softer places. Wood creaks under weight. A horse exhales into the damp air and lowers its head, patient beneath the rain. Then the cart continues westward and becomes another sound absorbed by the city. The smell changes as you walk. Smoke remains everywhere, but now other things begin to appear within it. Wet wool from the people passing close beside you. Leather from a shop already closing. The faint soreness of spilled ale near a doorway. Food from somewhere ahead. Cornhill belongs to trade, and even after the day's commerce begins folding itself away, traces of that life remain in the street. London is the largest city in England, and goods pass through it in quantities that would be difficult to imagine from the quietness now beginning to settle over individual shops. Yet the city does not announce its importance. It leaves evidence. A merchant's better cloth. A servant carrying something carefully wrapped. A horse standing beneath the shelter of an inn-yard. A foreign word heard briefly in conversation and then lost beneath rain. This London is not sealed from the world. Italian merchants connected to the German trading communities, Gascons, craftsmen from elsewhere in England, rural servants and apprentices newly arrived in the city, all can belong to its daily motion. But in the half-dark, distinctions become softer. Rain gives everyone the same shining shoulders, the same dripping hood, the same desire for a dry doorway. A better cloak may carry finer cloth. A wealthy citizen may have fur beneath the wool, a silver buckle at the belt, perhaps a servant close behind. But water does not recognize status. It gathers along every hem. It runs down every roof. It darkens timber belonging to rich and poor alike, and for a little while the entire city seems joined by the simple fact of being wet. A brighter patch of light appears ahead, not bright in the way a modern street might be bright, only brighter than the darkness surrounding it. A doorway has been left open. Inside, firelight reaches across a room and stops at the threshold. Someone passes between you and the hearth, becoming a dark shape for a moment before the light returns. The warmth does not reach you from here, the smell does. Ale, smoke, something cooked with onions or garlic. Wet clothing warming beside the fire. It may be an alehouse, a tavern, or another place serving food and drink, and the distinction matters to those who live here. An alehouse might be little more than a domestic room where all is sold. A tavern belongs more closely to wine and commercial drinking. An inn has another responsibility entirely, offering lodging, food, and space for travellers and their horses. From the street, however, the first difference you notice is simpler. Inside is warm. Outside is not. A man enters before you. He pushes back his hood as soon as he crosses the threshold, and for the brief second before the door draws inward again, the room opens like a small world within the larger city. Trestle tables, wooden vessels, faces coloured amber by fire, steam rising faintly from soaked wool. Then the door closes. The vision is gone. Rain fills the space it leaves behind. Perhaps sleep depends on such contrasts, cold making warmth deeper, darkness making one candle sufficient, silence making a distant voice seem close. The people who live here have no switch with which to banish night from a room. Light must be made, protected, paid for, carried. A tallow candle is useful because it is there, not because it is perfect. It gutters, it smokes, its flame bends when air reaches it. Wax burns more cleanly and belongs more comfortably to churches and wealthier households, but most of London does not need elegance from every flame. Only enough light to finish a task, enough to see a bowl, enough to find a bed, enough to recognize the face across a table. You move onward, the street draws you closer toward Cheapside, and the city seems wider there, even before you reach it. During the day, this is one of London's great commercial spaces, a place where goods and people gather in numbers. Now the rain is helping evening empty it. The transformation is gradual. One stall still stands open, another is already covered. A merchant leaves beneath a cloak, while someone behind him secures what remains. Fragments from the day's market cling to the wet ground. Vegetable leaves, bits of straw, small pieces of packing and basket work, ordinary remnants with no value now that trade has ended. Rain flattens them against the street. Water runs around the legs of wooden structures. Canvas darkens. A loose edge moves gently in the wind. No great event marks the end of commerce. The market simply becomes a different place. A few hours ago, voices would have filled the open space. Buyers and sellers would have negotiated over food, cloth, tools, and other goods. Carts would have competed for room. Apprentices would have moved between shops. Animals and people would have contributed their separate noises and smells to the crowd. Now every sound has more room around it. A board knocks against wood. Someone calls briefly from a doorway. Hooves cross the wet ground. Then nothing but rain for several breaths. Cheapside possesses its own landmarks, even in the darkening weather. The great conduit belongs to the city's water supply, part of a London that has learned to bring water toward its people, rather than depending only upon the river beside it. The Eleanor Cross also gives form to the space. But you do not stop before either of them, as though visiting monuments. The people around you do not. A servant may think of water that must be carried. A merchant may think of tomorrow's business. A hungry apprentice may think only of supper. Buildings become history much later. While they are alive, they are usually practical things. A conduit is where water comes from. A church bell is something heard while working. A market is somewhere you stand in the cold. A cathedral spire is part of the sky you have known since childhood. Perhaps this is why the past feels different when approached quietly. Once the names and dates are allowed to soften, people begin to return. A young apprentice appears beneath an overhanging floor, carrying something inside before night. His clothes are practical, his movements quick. Apprentices may live within the master's household, as well as work there, sharing the building with family and servants, their lives tied closely to the rhythms of the workshop. Daylight has belonged to work. Soon the upper rooms will belong to sleep. But between those two states lies the evening. Food, chores, conversation, prayer, clothing that needs mending, a fire that must be watched, a door that must be secured. Small obligations hold the household together long after public trade has ended. Through a narrow opening you hear voices inside one such building. You cannot make out the words. There may be several people in the room, perhaps a family, perhaps apprentices and servants among them. A child's voice rises once, another voice answers. Then the shutter is pulled fully into place, and the household withdraws from you. The sound dims, The wall becomes solid again. Above the street, upper floors project toward one another, making the slice of sky narrower as darkness grows. In some places the closeness offers a little protection from rain. In others it only causes water to fall in unexpected places, streaming from an edge and striking the ground with sudden force. You step around one such cascade. Your cloak is already heavy enough. Wool can resist weather for a time, but a long soaking changes it. The fabric holds moisture. The weight settles on the shoulders. Cold reaches the hands first, then seems to wait there. A figure passes wearing patterns that knock faintly against the ground. Wood, mud, wood again. A rhythm made only by walking. Beyond the market, a smell rises that makes you aware of how long the evening has become. Pottage, or something close to it. Peas, beans, perhaps leeks, softened together into the kind of food that belongs easily to ordinary households. Bread will accompany many meals. Salt fish or cheese may appear depending on means, season, household and day. Elsewhere wealth changes the table. Whiter wheaten bread, wine, more meat, spices whose journeys into London have been far longer than yours tonight. Cinnamon, ginger, saffron. A few tastes capable of carrying distant landscapes into a dark English room. But from the street you experience none of these as a list, only as warmth escaping whenever a door opens. A smell of bread, then broth, then smoke, then rain washes the air clean enough for the next scent to arrive. You begin turning south. Bread Street will eventually lead you toward the Thames, though the river remains hidden behind layers of roofs, lanes, houses, workshops, and warehouses. For the first time tonight, the direction of the journey begins to feel different. Until now you have moved toward the heart of the city. Soon you will begin moving toward its water. The rain follows you into the narrower street, tapping against closed shutters, while the brighter spaces of Cheapside slowly disappear behind you. Ahead, somewhere beyond the houses, the Thames is waiting in the dark. The farther you descend along Bread Street, the less of Cheapside remains around you. Its wider market space is soon reduced to a memory of scattered voices behind the rain. Here the houses gather closely again. Their upper stories project above the lane, and the darkness between them seems to deepen with every step southward. Water has found countless paths through the street. Some of it runs visibly beside you, slipping through shallow channels and around the uneven ground. Some disappears beneath straw and mud before emerging farther downhill. From a roof edge above, a steady stream falls into the lane and breaks into droplets against a wooden surface below. You hear it before you pass beneath it. A hollow, repetitive tapping. Then it is behind you. Another sound takes its place, a door closing, an iron ring striking oak. Someone fastening the night outside. Bread Street is settling into evening. Its name belongs to the commercial geography of the city, to a London in which occupations often gather close to one another and leave their identity upon the places where they work. Bakers, fishmongers, goldsmiths, skinners, butchers, merchants. Trades do not scatter evenly through these streets. They gather. They make neighborhoods smell different, sound different, wake at different hours, and sleep differently too. But much of that labor is hidden now. What remains visible is what work leaves behind. A shutter darkened by years of weather, a threshold worn by feet, a faint dusting of something pale protected beneath an overhang, a basket carried indoors. the smell of grain and warm food caught briefly in the damp air before smoke overtakes it again. Somewhere within one of these buildings, supper has already begun. You do not see the room at first, only light beneath a badly fitted shutter. A thin amber line appears against the wall, narrow enough that the darkness surrounding it seems enormous. Then a voice. Quiet. Another answers. No words reach you clearly. You walk past without knowing who lives there. Perhaps a craftsman's household. Perhaps servants and apprentices share the building with the master and his family. Their work and domestic lives need not occupy separate worlds. The same structure can contain a shop below, storage somewhere behind it, sleeping chambers above, food being prepared near warmth, and people whose days are tied to one another by labor. An apprentice who spent daylight handling goods or tools may now sit close to the same fire as the people who employ him. A servant may still be moving between tasks. A child may already be tired. A garment soaked earlier in the day may hang where warmth can slowly draw moisture from the wool. The smell of wet cloth near a hearth is heavy and animal, like lanolin, smoke, dampness, human warmth returning to something that had grown cold outside. For those who entered their homes before you, the rain has changed character. Outside it falls on shoulders. Inside it becomes sound. It beats against shutters, runs along roof tiles, drips from eaves into the yard. The weather is no longer something touching the body. It is something heard beyond the wall. There is comfort in that difference. You continue downhill. The temperature seems lower now, although perhaps it is only the wetness of your clothing. Your hands have grown cold enough that you notice them without meaning to. When your fingers move, the sensation is slower than it was at Aldgate. The wool across your shoulders holds the rain. Each step reminds you of its weight. Ahead, a person walks with a lantern. The flame is enclosed against the weather, a small trembling presence behind its protective sides. It does not illuminate the entire lane. It barely illuminates the person carrying it. The nearest wall appears, a doorway, a puddle. Then each disappears again as the lantern moves on. Watching it recede, you understand how darkness can change the meaning of distance. In daylight, the end of a street belongs to the eye. At night, it belongs to imagination. You see only as far as the next flame allows. The lantern turns into another lane and vanishes. For a moment there is almost nothing ahead. The sky is clouded. Whatever natural light might otherwise reach the streets has little strength tonight. The city remains present through sound instead. Footsteps somewhere behind you, rain touching wood, a horse shifting inside a yard, the muffled scrape of something being moved across a floor. Far away, a bell, and beneath those sounds, something new. At first it is difficult to identify, a low presence rather than a distinct noise. You take several more steps. The sound continues. Water, not the rain around you. Something larger. The Thames is still beyond the houses, but the city has begun to reveal its direction. The river has shaped London long before this particular evening. Trade reaches its banks. Wharves and quays gather along the waterfront. Fish, grain, wine, timber, cloth, and countless other goods move through the spaces beside it. London Bridge binds the city to the southern bank, while also constricting the tidal water through its stone arches. But from Bread Street, none of this needs explanation. The river simply begins as a distant sound, and as you descend, it becomes a smell. Dampness changes. The air has a different weight now. Smoke remains, but beneath it lies something colder and more open: river water, wet timber, mud exposed or covered by the shifting tide, organic smells carried from the waterfront. The Thames announces itself before you see it. A man passes uphill carrying a covered load. He does not look toward you. His cloak is dark with rain, and the lower edge is stained by the street. His steps are deliberate, as though he has walked this slope enough times to know where the ground is worst even when he can barely see it. Soon another figure follows. Then the street is empty again. There is a temptation, looking into such darkness, to imagine medieval London as a place without order. But the city around you is regulated in ways visible and invisible. Authorities concern themselves with blocked drains, refuse, dung, offal, privies, disorder, fire, movement after curfew, the carrying of weapons, the responsibilities of wards and households. Rules do not make the streets clean by modern standards, nor do they make everyone obey. Mud still collects around your shoes. Animal waste still mixes with the ordinary dirt of urban life. Illegal dumping can still happen. Drainage can fail. Yet this is not a city indifferent to itself. Londoners know when a nuisance is a nuisance. They know when a gutter needs clearing. They know the danger of a neglected fire. They know how quickly one household's carelessness can become another household's problem. In streets where timber buildings stand close enough for upper floors to reach toward one another, survival has always required a certain attention to neighbors. Fire is perhaps the clearest reminder. A flame in a room offers comfort. A flame escaping that room can threaten an entire street. Tonight, however, the rain lies heavily across roofs and walls. For once, water feels protective. The same weather that chills your hands dampens timber and reduces the easy flight of sparks. Somewhere inside a house, a fire is being watched. Perhaps its embers will later be banked. Perhaps someone will glance at them before sleep, not from historical superstition, but from the ordinary knowledge that fire gives and fire takes. You reach a small opening between buildings, an inn-yard perhaps, or a service space belonging to one of the larger structures. A horse stands beneath partial shelter. Its body is darker where rain has reached it. The animal shifts one hind leg and lowers its head. From somewhere within the yard comes the smell of straw, wet straw, dung, leather harness, warm animal breath. A dog moves briefly across the entrance and stops. It looks outward, then disappears again. The yard returns to shadow. Animals remain everywhere within the human city, though not always in the picturesque freedom imagined centuries later. Horses are necessary to movement. Dogs inhabit households and yards. Cats work quietly around stores of grain. Pigs may be forbidden from roaming freely, yet regulations themselves remind you that people have reason to make such rules. Where food accumulates, other creatures follow. Mice, rats, birds beneath the eaves. London contains many lives that do not appear in civic records unless they become property, nuisance, food, or loss. Rain reaches all of them tonight. A pigeon settles deeper beneath a roof edge. A dog searches for a dry angle of stone. A horse waits for morning. You move on. The houses become more utilitarian as you draw closer to Thames Street. Storage matters here. Access matters. The river nearby alters the purpose of buildings. The smell of fish appears more strongly. Not the impossible freshness of ice from some later marketplace. but the sharp mixture of fish itself, wet baskets, brine where preserved goods are involved, timber, scales, river water, it joins other odors without replacing them. Smoke, mud, owl, fish, wet wool, something cooking. The city is never one smell for long, nor one sound. A sudden burst of laughter comes from behind a door. Several voices. Then a wooden vessel or die strikes a table with a hard little clack. Warmth lives behind the wall. You slow near the entrance. The door opens before you reach it. A man steps out and immediately pulls his hood forward against the rain. For an instant you can see inside. The room is smoky. Firelight catches the edges of faces and wooden cups. A trestle table stands close to the hearth. Damp cloaks hang or rest where their owners hope they may dry. The air within must be thick with the odors of bodies, ale, smoke, food, and wet wool. The man closes the door. Darkness returns. You remain outside. There is something peaceful in knowing that rooms like this exist all around you. Not peaceful because every life within them is easy. It is not. Labor can be hard. Wealth is distributed unevenly. Cold reaches the poor more quickly than the prosperous. The quality of bread, bedding, clothing, space, and fire all change with means. Yet human beings continue to create small interiors against the night. A table, a flame, a bowl, a conversation. Shelter has always been one of humanity's quietest achievements. Not the great hall, not the cathedral, not the stone bridge. Simply the ability to close a door while rain falls outside. You walk again. Thames Street lies close now. The ground seems to guide you toward it, and the river air becomes stronger between the buildings. Somewhere to your left and right, the waterfront stretches through darkness, lined with warehouses, wharves, stairs, boats. Goods and the labour that connects London to the water. A stronger gust enters the lane. It finds the wet wool around your shoulders and presses cold through it. For the first time since entering the city, the buildings no longer seem capable of containing the weather. The space ahead feels wider. You pass beneath the final shelter of a projecting upper floor. Rainwater drips steadily from its edge behind you. Then you step out toward Thames Street. The river is not yet fully visible, but the darkness ahead is different. There are fewer walls to hold it, and somewhere beyond the warehouses and wet roofs, the Thames moves through London without sleeping. The first thing you notice on Thames Street is not the river itself. It is the wind. It moves more freely here, finding spaces between the buildings and pushing the rain sideways beneath your hood. After the closeness of Bread Street, where houses seem to gather around you, the change feels almost like stepping into another climate. The cold reaches your face. You turn slightly against it. Ahead, darkness stretches between warehouses, wharves, narrow passages, and the irregular structures lining the waterfront. The Thames remains partly concealed, but there is no mistaking its presence now. You can hear the water moving, not gently. London's river is tidal, and beneath the soft hiss of rain there is a deeper motion, a restless sound rising and falling somewhere beyond the timber structures ahead. The city has grown around this water. Tonight, however, the river does not look like a great avenue of trade. It looks almost empty. Daylight has withdrawn from the quays, taking much of their activity with it. The men who handled barrels, baskets, fish, grain, timber, wine, cloth, and other cargoes through the day have mostly turned toward shelter. Food, warmth, or whatever obligations wait beyond the waterfront. What remains is the evidence of work, a rope darkened by rain, a barrel beneath an overhang, wooden baskets stacked where they will not fill with water, heavy doors closed against the weather, the outlines of moored craft moving almost imperceptibly beyond the quay. The rain touches everything with the same dull shine. Even wood that must normally feel rough beneath the hand looks polished in the weak light. You walk eastward. Thames Street follows the river closely, narrow and busy in daylight, bordered by the practical world of commerce. Warehouses and riverfront buildings crowd near one another. Openings lead toward quays and stairs descending to the water. Tonight those openings are darker than the street itself. A lantern appears briefly near one of them. Someone is still working. The figure moves slowly, not because the task is mysterious, but because darkness and rain require care. The lantern swings close to the body. Its light passes over wet planks and the rounded side of a barrel before disappearing behind a timber post. There is no reason to imagine that the waterfront ceases entirely when daylight ends. Some work can continue. Some people must remain near goods, boats, animals, or buildings. Yet the great rhythm of trade has softened, and because of that, smaller sounds have become easier to hear. A rope tightening, timber creaking as a vessel responds to the water, a faint splash somewhere below, rain striking the river in countless drops that cannot be distinguished individually, becoming instead a fine whisper over the darker movement beneath. You approach one of the gaps leading toward the water. The ground becomes treacherous. Stone and timber made wet by rain demand slower steps. Somewhere below, the foreshore may emerge or disappear with the tide, leaving mud and slick surfaces along the river's edge. You do not descend. You stand where the street still feels secure and look outward. At last the Thames is visible. Only partly. No clean silver ribbon runs through the night. Clouds cover the sky, and there is little natural light to give the river shape. Instead you understand it through fragments. A lantern reflection trembles. The silhouette of a moored boat lifts and lowers. Water catches one narrow streak of amber, breaks it apart, then carries it away. Beyond that darkness, the opposite bank is somewhere out there. Southwark lies across the river, connected to the city by London Bridge farther east. Inns, workshops, brew houses, travellers and other businesses belong to that southern suburb. But from here it seems less like another settlement than a faint suggestion beyond black water. You hear something from a vessel, wood rubbing against wood, then the quiet strain of a mooring rope. A boat does not need to be moving to feel alive. The tide gives it breath, forward, back, a little rise, a small settling, and the sound repeats. Perhaps people have always been comforted by repetitive movement because the body recognizes something in it. The rocking of a cradle, walking, breathing, water touching a hull. Nothing needs to happen. The movement itself is enough. Rain continues to gather on your cloak. A cold drop finds the edge of your hood and runs briefly along your cheek. You step back from the river opening and continue eastward. The smell becomes stronger near the commercial waterfront. Fish is unmistakable now. Billingsgate lies ahead, closely tied to the river and its trade. Even after the busiest hours have passed, such a place does not lose the traces of the day's work simply because darkness comes. Wet baskets, scales, timber, river water, fish, fresh or preserved, mud, the lingering remains of food and labor. The smells overlap until separating them becomes almost impossible. Rain changes them too. Some odors are flattened. Others seem released by wet surfaces. Old wood has its own smell when soaked. So does wool. So does earth. The medieval city in rain is not simply dirtier or cleaner than the same city on a dry day. It becomes another version of itself, sharper in some places, muted in others. You pass a closed frontage associated with the river trade. Water drips from its edge in a steady line. Something metallic hangs somewhere above and moves faintly when the wind reaches it. No one stands outside, and yet behind the wall a small glow escapes through an imperfect closure. Someone is awake, perhaps guarding goods, perhaps finishing supper, perhaps doing nothing more important than sitting close to warmth while listening to the storm. The city often hides its most human moments behind walls. Outside, history leaves monuments. Inside, it leaves people getting tired. A little farther along, a doorway opens. Warm light reaches the street, and two figures emerge carrying something between them. They move carefully beneath the weight, disappearing toward another entrance before you can make out much more. There is no drama in it, only labor continuing a little longer than daylight. When they are gone, the doorway stays open for several moments. The smell inside is different from the river. Drier, wood smoke, perhaps owl. Something cooked. Then the door closes and Thames Street belongs once again to rain. The difference between inside and outside has become one of the night's recurring measures. Every open doorway reminds you how cold you are. Every closed doorway reminds you that warmth exists somewhere nearby. You continue walking east. Billingsgate emerges gradually rather than announcing itself with a boundary. The concentration of river smells changes. Structures associated with market activity appear through darkness. Places busy with fish and trade during the day are quieter now, yet not purified by emptiness. The physical remains of commerce stay where people leave them. A basket lies inverted beneath shelter. Another has been stacked against a wall. Rainwater runs around fragments too small or worthless to have been carried away. You hear a dog somewhere nearby. One bark, then another farther off. The second might not be an answer at all. The street between them remains still. Above, the roofs are almost invisible, though occasionally a gust shifts smoke low enough for you to smell it more strongly. Wood fires, and sometimes something harsher. Sea coal is known in London and used particularly in certain trades, though it does not belong to every household fire. When its smoke joins the damp air, the waterfront acquires another bitter layer. It passes quickly. The wind changes. Rain returns as the dominant smell. You walk beside buildings whose purpose is tied to exchange. Yet the night has stripped away many of the signs of commerce. A barrel is only a dark shape now. A warehouse is a wall. A market is a wet open space. Money is invisible. What remains are materials. Wood, stone, iron. Wool, leather. Perhaps darkness simplifies the world this way. Daylight tells you what things are for. Night tells you what they are made of. Your hand touches a wet timber post as you pass close beside it. The wood is cold. Rain has filled the grain. For a second, that simple sensation feels more immediate than the entire city. 600 years from your own time, a hand against wet oak requires no translation. Cold remains cold. Rain remains rain. Fatigue still settles into shoulders. Warm food still draws people toward a doorway. The distance between centuries sometimes disappears in the smallest physical things. A bell reaches the waterfront. Its tone is faint at first, carried unevenly through the rain. Another follows from farther away. The river seems to hold the sound differently from the streets. Without so many walls immediately surrounding you, the notes travel into a broader darkness before fading. London's churches remain hidden among the roofs behind you. Somewhere within religious houses, evening observance continues according to rhythms older than many of the buildings around you. Somewhere else, a family has finished eating. A servant has another task. An apprentice yawns over the remains of the day. A merchant counts what can wait until morning. A watch duty begins to matter more as ordinary movement declines. None of these lives knows that you are passing through them, and that feels right. You are not here to interrupt, only to notice. The rain begins to ease, not stop. The drops are simply finer now, less insistent against cloth. In their place, the Thames becomes louder. You can hear it beyond the structures beside you, moving with a patience completely different from human time. Markets open and close. Houses rise and disappear. Walls are repaired. Kings die. Apprentices become masters or do not. Children grow old. But the river continues through every generation that gathers along its banks. The thought does not need to become a lesson. The water asks for none. It simply moves. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, London Bridge waits across the river. You cannot yet see its full shape. But now and then, when the waterfront opens enough, there seems to be something larger interrupting the black horizon to the east. Stone, houses, the constricted river beneath it. You are not ready to reach it yet. The night is still young enough for London to hold many lights behind its shutters. So you remain on Thames Street, walking slowly past Billingsgate while the rain becomes softer and the unseen bridge gathers shape ahead. The softer rain changes the street more than silence would. What had been a steady curtain against the roofs now becomes a fine drifting veil, light enough that individual sounds begin separating from one another again. The river, a loose sign moving above a doorway, water dripping from a roof edge, and somewhere behind you, the slow knock of wooden pattens against wet ground. Someone is approaching. You move nearer the buildings to leave space in the narrow street. A small light emerges from the darkness, carried low enough to illuminate little more than the hands around it and the shining ground immediately ahead. The figure passes without hurry. For a moment the lantern touches the folds of a heavy wool garment, the edge of a hood, the wet surface of a wall. Then the light moves onward. Night has not emptied London. It has simply changed who belongs outside. The shoppers and apprentices who filled the streets earlier are mostly behind doors now. Those still moving have reasons of their own. Work unfinished, duties that cannot wait for morning, a journey between one household and another, perhaps some task connected with the waterfront. And as ordinary movement thins, another presence becomes more important. The watch. London's wards share responsibility for maintaining order through the darker hours. Watch and ward do not make the city perfectly secure, and the night is not transformed into something orderly simply because regulations exist, but neither are these streets abandoned to darkness. A person wandering after curfew may attract attention. Weapons carried at the wrong time may attract more. Doors are fastened because burglary is possible. Fires are watched because timber stands close to timber. Gates and important approaches matter differently once daylight commerce has withdrawn. There is a quiet boundary forming around the night. Not a wall you can see, a change in expectation. During the day, being outside needs no explanation. Later, it may. You become aware of this not through confrontation, but through a distant movement ahead. Two figures stand briefly where a lane meets Thames Street. One carries a lantern. Their light shifts over a wall and disappears as they move away. There is no theatrical cry, no announcement breaking the calm, only watchfulness. The city looking after itself as best it can. You continue eastward. Water drips from the hem of your cloak, now rather than pouring from it. The rain has weakened enough for the wind to become more noticeable, and each gust lifts the cold dampness from the Thames and carries it through the openings between buildings. A doorway on your left is still open. This one invites you closer, not because anyone calls to you, because warmth has escaped into the street. It reaches your face before you fully see the room. You step beneath the shelter beside the entrance, just far enough to leave the rain. Inside, the place is modest. No grand hall, no polished chamber, only timber, smoke, people, and fire. Perhaps an alehouse, perhaps another small establishment serving those who have not yet gone home. A few men sit around a trestle table. Another figure stands nearer the hearth. Wool garments occupy nearly as much of the room as their owners, bulky from dampness and layers. The fire is the center of everything, not visually alone, physically. People turn toward it without thinking. Hands extend closer. Wet fabric gives up some of its moisture. Faces become warmer on one side than the other. The air holds the smell of spilled ale, smoke, damp cloth, cooked food, and bodies that have spent the day working. A wooden die strikes the table. Then another. A brief laugh rises. Nothing louder follows. Even amusement seems contained by the heaviness of the evening. Someone drinks. Someone says something you cannot distinguish. The fire shifts and a small piece of wood settles inward with a soft collapse. For a few breaths, you remain close enough to feel the heat. The effect is immediate. Cold fingers begin to ache as warmth returns to them. The skin of your face feels suddenly hot after so long outside, and your cloak, still wet, gives off the smell of wool more strongly than before. This is not luxury. Yet after the waterfront it feels almost extravagant. A roof, a flame, dry ground, human beings seated together. The simplest comforts become enormous when the world beyond the door is dark and wet. A bowl passes from one pair of hands to another. There is bread on the table. The food is ordinary enough that no one inside studies it. That may be the most intimate thing about it. What survives in histories as diet, price, trade, or agriculture is here merely supper. A piece torn from a loaf, something warm eaten with it, ale nearby. No one pauses to understand the century. Hunger does not experience time historically, neither does warmth. You step away before the room can become yours. The cold receives you again. This time it feels sharper because you have remembered what it is not. Behind you, the doorway stays open for another moment. Then someone closes it. The fire disappears. You walk east. The night's darker rhythm gathers around you again. A church bell sounds from deeper within the city. One note, then another. Its resonance passes through the wet air and seems briefly to settle upon the roofs. Religious life does not end when households shut their doors. London contains more than 100 parish churches, along with religious houses whose own cycles of prayer continue through hours when most people sleep. The towers are not always visible from where you walk, but they remain present through sound. Bells make an invisible architecture above the city. A person can stand in darkness and know there are other communities beyond the walls surrounding them. Another parish, another church, another group of people listening to some of the same rain. Within a church at this hour, darkness can be deeper than the street in some corners. Cold stone, faint beeswax, the lingering smell of incense, small flames near sacred spaces insufficient to conquer the building's shadows and never intended to. A church does not need to be brightly illuminated to be occupied by meaning. Perhaps darkness makes certain spaces larger. A roof cannot be seen clearly. A column disappears upward. Footsteps become echoes. The limits of the room retreat. Outside, you pass the mouth of a lane leading away from the river. The city beyond it is almost completely black, except for one narrow line of hearth, light leaking beneath a shutter. Someone in that house may already be preparing for sleep. Bedding varies with means. A prosperous household can offer comfort impossible in a poorer room. Elsewhere a pallet, straw or chaff-filled bedding, linen where available, and woolen coverings may have to provide enough protection from the cold. Privacy also depends on space. A merchant's household and a labourer's household do not retire into the same kind of night. Servants and apprentices may sleep within the structures that hold their work as well as their domestic lives. Yet eventually every household confronts the same darkness. Clothing comes off or loosens, shoes are set aside, doors are checked, the fire diminishes, voices lower. One room after another disappears from the active city. You cannot see this happening from Thames Street. You sense it. The gaps between human sounds are becoming longer. Earlier, the city seemed to breathe through voices. Now it breathes through water. The Thames moves beside you. Rain slides from roofs. A mooring line groans and settles. Wind travels along the waterfront. You begin to notice how rarely a cart passes now. The absence itself becomes a sound. A few hours ago, wheels and hooves belonged naturally to the street. Now a distant set of hoofbeats seems important enough to listen to. They approach from the west. Slow, measured. A horse appears first as movement in darkness. Then a lantern catches part of its wet shoulder. A rider or handler moves with it, the details too faint to distinguish. The animal's hooves strike firmer ground, then splash through shallow water. For several seconds the sound fills everything. Then it continues away toward the east. The city closes around the empty space behind it. Perhaps this is what night really does. It does not silence the world. It gives every remaining thing more room. A footstep becomes a journey. A bell becomes distance. A flame becomes shelter. A voice becomes evidence that someone else is awake. Ahead, the shadow that has been gathering over the river is becoming clearer. London Bridge. You can distinguish more of it now. Not all at once, and not as the clean outline that daylight would provide. Stone rises from darkness. Above it, buildings turn the bridge into something more than a simple crossing. Houses and shops occupy its length, making it part street, part neighborhood, part structure suspended over one of the strongest forces in the city. Beneath it, the Thames does not pass quietly. the bridge's many stone piers, and the protective structures around them constrict the tidal water, forcing it through narrow arches where currents can become dangerous. Even from a distance, the river seems to change near it. The sound is deeper there, more concentrated, water meeting stone, water divided and forced onward, a permanent struggle that no one standing on the bridge needs to think about every time they cross. Londoners have built homes and shops above that movement. Perhaps human beings have always done this, placed ordinary life beside enormous forces, a house above rushing water, a village beneath mountains, a field beneath changing skies, then gone inside to eat supper as though the world were not immense. The bridge grows larger as you walk. You can now sense the narrow approach leading toward it, the dark shapes of buildings gathering around the entrance, the river widening behind and beside them. But another sound stops you before you reach it. From somewhere inland comes a low sequence of bells. You stand still. The notes travel over wet roofs, across alleys and courtyards, through smoke and mist, until they reach the river. One fades before the next has completely disappeared. For a while London seems held between two kinds of repetition, bronze above, water below, the measured human marking of the night, and the endless movement that requires no clock at all. When the bells finally fade, the river remains. You begin walking again, slowly, toward the bridge. The bridge does not reveal itself all at once. As you approach, its houses appear first. Dark roofs gather above the river where no roofs should be, forming what seems from a distance like another strip of London suspended between the banks. Their walls rise close together, their upper floors irregular against the cloudy sky, some projecting outward as though trying to claim a little more space from the narrow crossing beneath them. Only when you come nearer does the stone beneath those buildings become unmistakable. London Bridge. The street leading onto it is wet and darker than the waterfront behind you. Water runs between feet and wheels, collecting wherever the uneven surface allows. The rain is light now, almost fine enough to float, yet the bridge itself is still soaked from the long evening. The air changes as you step toward it. Water lies below you as well as around you. The Thames presses through the arches beneath the stone, and the sound that seemed distant from Thames Street becomes powerful here. Not violent, constant, a deep rushing below human life. The bridge stands on many stone piers, their bases protected by timber structures built to divide the force of the river. Between them, tidal water is narrowed and accelerated through the arches. From above, you cannot see all of this clearly. You hear it. Water gathers into a low roar. Sometimes another note emerges within it as current strikes timber or stone differently. Then the sound joins itself again. And above that endless movement, people have built a street. You take your first steps onto the bridge. Immediately, the river nearly disappears. Buildings line the crossing closely enough that this does not feel like walking across open water. Houses and shops stand along much of the bridge, turning it into an inhabited piece of city. Wooden frontages face the roadway. Upper stories lean toward one another. Doors are closed. Shutters are fastened. A little light escapes here and there from rooms where someone is still awake. For those who live above the Thames, the river's sound must become ordinary. At first, you cannot imagine sleeping over such water. Then you remember the rain, how, after hours beneath it, you had stopped hearing every drop. Perhaps the body is always learning what it can ignore. A child born in one of these houses may know the river beneath the floor as naturally as another child knows wind against a field. A merchant might fall asleep to currents pushing between the piers. A servant might wake in darkness, hear the same water, and barely notice it. What sounds enormous to a visitor becomes the background of another person's life. You move farther onto the bridge. It is narrower than the open riverside approaches made it seem from a distance. Houses consume space. People, animals, and carts must share what remains, and in daylight the crossing can be intensely busy. Tonight it is quieter. That quietness allows you to notice the architecture differently. A shop sign hangs above one frontage, dark and dripping. A shutter trembles slightly in the wind. Water runs down plaster and timber and disappears toward the roadway. The stone beneath your feet holds the cold. London Bridge is not merely a road to Southwark. It is a neighbourhood. People eat here, work here, trade here, sleep here. The bridge has its own chapel too, dedicated to Thomas, built into the crossing itself. Yet even sacred stone must endure the same rain. You pass through a section where the buildings briefly allow a clearer opening toward the river. The darkness beyond is immense. For the first time since leaving Thames Street, you can see far enough along the water to understand how broad the night has become. Tiny points of light appear along the northern bank, not continuous illumination. Only scattered fires, lanterns, windows. They seem to float independently, separated by stretches of blackness. London from the river is a constellation built by people. Each light means something small. Someone eating, someone working, someone praying, someone not yet asleep. The city is not illuminated, it glimmers. Below, the river takes those lights and destroys their shapes. A reflection lengthens, breaks, returns, then disappears beneath the bridge. You lean no farther than necessary. The water beneath the arches deserves respect. For boatmen, passage through London Bridge can be hazardous. The constricted current creates difficult water around the piers, and timing and skill matter. Tonight there is no need to imagine a boat attempting it. The river itself tells enough. It moves beneath you with a force that feels indifferent to the buildings above. Stone resists. Water continues. Neither appears hurried. A gust crosses the opening and reaches your wet clothing. You step back between the buildings. Almost immediately, the bridge becomes a street again. This transformation is strange. A few steps from an open view of black tidal water, you now stand before a closed wooden door. Somewhere behind it is a household. The river may be directly beneath them, yet supper bowls still need cleaning. Bedding still needs arranging. A candle still has a price. Great forces rarely remove ordinary duties. Perhaps they make them more necessary. You hear voices ahead, low, two people walking toward you. Their lantern appears first, then their forms. One leads a horse carefully along the wet road. The animal's hooves sound different here than they did in the mud near Aldgate. Harder, sharper. Each step briefly rises above the Thames. The horse lowers its head as the figures pass. Warm breath appears faintly in the cold air, then vanishes. You wait close to a wall to give them room. The lantern moves across your face and away. For several seconds you listen to the hooves receding behind you. One, then another slower, softer, finally lost beneath the river. The crossing feels empty again. Some of the shops around you will belong to merchants whose days begin early. The bridge sits in one of London's most useful positions, connecting the city with Southwark and the roads beyond. Goods and travellers pass here continually while daylight allows, but night changes value. A shop front that mattered enormously at midday is only a wall now. The best position in the market cannot make darkness leave sooner. Money does not brighten a closed street unless some of it is spent on flame. A tiny light trembles behind one shutter, perhaps a tallow candle. Its smell does not reach you, but you know how such a room might feel. Smoky, dim, every object visible only where the flame chooses to reach it. The people inside are not necessarily asleep, simply because the street is quiet. Someone may be checking goods. Someone may be finishing an account. Someone may be praying before bed. Someone may be mending fabric. Someone may simply be sitting in silence. The history of nighttime contains many hours in which nothing remarkable happens. That may be why so little of it survives. Records preserve disputes, fines, deaths, property, crime, trade, things that required writing. They rarely preserve a person listening to rain for several minutes before falling asleep. Yet those unnoticed minutes make up most human lives. You walk on. Near the chapel, the character of the bridge shifts again. Religious space exists within commerce, stone among timber, prayer within a street devoted to movement. The chapel of St. Thomas belongs naturally to a bridge associated with journeys. Travellers cross, goods cross, news crosses, pilgrims cross. The river beneath carries other journeys east and west. For medieval Londoners, movement and faith are not separate categories needing different chapters. A crossing can have a chapel because crossing itself matters. A journey has uncertainty. Water has danger. Arrival cannot always be assumed, and gratitude often belongs to ordinary survival. Tonight the chapel is mostly shadow. Rainwater traces the exterior stone. The smell nearby changes from wet timber to colder masonry. Stone holds weather differently. Wood releases a dark, earthy scent when soaked. Stone smells almost clean by comparison. Cold mineral dampness, the faint odor of river air. Perhaps, somewhere within, traces of wax and incense. The wind shifts again. For a moment, the rain stops touching you. You look upward. The clouds have not broken. No stars appear, yet the absence of rain feels strangely spacious after so many hours beneath it. Water continues dripping from roofs and signs, so the city behaves as though rain is still falling even when the sky has paused. Drops strike the roadway. The river rushes underneath. A gutter empties somewhere out of sight. The storm lingers in what it has left behind. You continue southward along the bridge. London now lies partly behind you. Ahead is Southwark. The southern bank belongs to a different jurisdictional world from the city, and its inns and businesses serve travellers approaching London from the roads beyond. But you have not crossed far enough to leave the bridge's strange middle ground, for now you are between places, neither fully north nor south. The Thames underneath, darkness around you. Perhaps every bridge creates this feeling. To cross water is to spend a few moments belonging to neither bank. Behind you is where you were, ahead is where you will be, and beneath you something moves that does not care which direction you choose. A door opens farther down the bridge. Warm light spreads over the street. A woman steps briefly outside, throws no refuse into the road, but only reaches for something left beneath the shelter beside the doorway and carries it indoors. The moment is ordinary enough to disappear almost as soon as it occurs. The door closes. Again there is darkness. You keep walking. Halfway across, the water seems loudest. Perhaps the position only makes you more aware of it. The currents passing through different arches merge into a broad, continuous sound that seems to fill the stone itself. You stop. There is nowhere else you need to be. For a while, you listen. Behind the nearest walls, the people of the bridge continue their evening. Farther north, London settles toward deeper night. Southward, inns and houses hold their own small fires. Below, the Thames carries rainwater, mud reflections, waste, leaves, and whatever else the city gives it toward the darkness downstream. Then a bell sounds somewhere behind you. Faint now. The bridge has placed water between you and many of the churches you passed earlier. The note reaches you anyway. A second follows. Then quiet. You turn slightly toward the northern bank. From here, medieval London is almost impossible to see as a whole. Only roofs, dark towers, a few lights, smoke dissolving into clouds. And yet somewhere among them are the streets you have already walked tonight. Aldgate, Cornhill, Cheapside, Bread Street, Thames Street. They have not disappeared because you left them. They continue without you. Shutters remain closed. Fires sink lower. Conversations become quieter. Some people are already asleep. Others are still awake. The city continues living even where you are no longer looking. And slowly, with the river moving beneath your feet, you continue toward the southern half of the bridge. The southern half of the bridge feels different before you can explain why. The houses remain close. The Thames still speaks beneath the stone. Water continues to drip from roofs, long after the rain itself has almost vanished. But London is beginning to sit behind you now. With every step southward, the immense dark mass of the city shifts from the place surrounding you to the place across the water. The change is subtle. A person walking home would hardly think about it. You notice only because tonight there is nowhere to hurry. Another opening appears between buildings. This one looks west. You stop beside it. The river is broader here than any street has allowed you to understand. Darkness has taken almost all of its color, leaving only movement. A small reflection flickers far upstream, perhaps from somewhere along the northern waterfront, stretching across the surface before the current pulls it apart. The rain has ended for now. Only the city continues dripping. Water falls from the bridge houses, from signs, from gutters and roof edges. It reaches the Thames in droplets too small to hear against the greater current below. The air smells washed, wet stone, wet oak, cold river mud, smoke from London, and somewhere very faintly food, perhaps from a house on the bridge, perhaps from Southwark ahead. You breathe more deeply without meaning to. The cold enters cleanly. For hours the rain had pressed smells downward into streets and doorways. Now the wind begins separating them, carrying one scent away before another takes its place. A candle goes out somewhere behind a shutter. You cannot see the moment itself. Only the light disappears. One of the bridge's tiny windows becomes black. Perhaps someone has gone to bed. Perhaps the candle was no longer needed. Either way, darkness gains another room. Across the city this must be happening again and again, one flame after another. Not simultaneously. London does not sleep at a single hour. A household withdraws. Then another. A tavern keeps its fire longer. A religious house continues its offices. A watchman remains awake. Somewhere a sick person cannot sleep. Somewhere a mother tends a child. Somewhere an apprentice is already dreaming while his master still sits over accounts. Somewhere a baker's night has not yet begun. A city does not fall asleep. People do. And because they do so separately, there is never one moment when London crosses entirely from waking into rest. You begin walking again. The roadway beneath you is slick, but the mud of the northern streets is largely absent here. Stone changes your steps. Your feet feel more firmly placed, even while moisture lies across the surface. The cold, however, has entered your shoes. Leather can resist only so much water. Each step carries a faint memory of the evening's puddles. Your toes have become something you feel as a single cold shape rather than separately. The body simplifies itself in bad weather. Hands, feet, face. Shoulders beneath wet wool. The rest retreats beneath layers. Ahead, a small doorway opens onto the bridge street. A man emerges carrying no lantern. He pauses until his eyes adjust. The darkness seems to absorb him almost completely. Then another person inside passes him a light. Only now does his shape become clear. He draws his cloak closer and walks south, several paces ahead of you. His lantern does not lead the way very far. That seems to be enough. There is no expectation that the whole street should be visible. Only the next few steps. You follow at a distance. His light becomes a quiet guide through the bridge houses, appearing and disappearing whenever his body passes between you and the flame. Then he turns through an opening and is gone. Again, you belong to darkness. The transition is almost comforting now. Your eyes have learned not to demand much from the night. A doorway, a roofline, the edge of a wall, a pale patch of wet stone. Enough. Modern darkness often feels like the absence of something that should be there. Here, darkness is simply one of the conditions of life. Like cold, like rain, like winter. It is expected, prepared for, worked around. There is no resentment in a shutter being closed against it. No surprise that a candle illuminates only a little. Perhaps people once understood darkness not as emptiness, but as a place with boundaries. A place where tasks changed, where movement slowed, where voices drew inward, where the familiar world became smaller until morning restored it. You pass another shop front. Its sign is impossible to identify now. By daylight, shape or painted imagery may tell customers what business belongs here even when they cannot read. Tonight the rain has turned the sign into a silhouette. It moves gently. Creak. Pause. Creak. The sound joins the river. Farther on, the houses thin enough for a stronger current of wind to cross the roadway. You feel it under the edge of your cloak. The wool presses against your legs. Somewhere beneath you, water breaks hard around one of the bridge piers. The sound deepens. London Bridge does something strange to the Thames. Its stone supports divide the river into narrower passages. Protective timber structures around the piers push into the current as well, reducing the space through which tidal water can move. The result is not the placid river imagined from a distant bank. Water accelerates, it tumbles, it curls behind obstacles. For those who work on boats, the bridge is not simply architecture overhead. It is a condition of the river itself, one learned through experience. A river can have places that require memory, a current near one pier, an approach that is safer at one state of tide than another, a mistake remembered because someone once survived it. knowledge carried not in books but in bodies, hands on oars, eyes on water, years spent noticing what the river does. Tonight you remain safely above it. Still, the force beneath the stone enters the imagination. You place one hand briefly against a wall beside you, cold timber. Solid, human. Below it, water. For centuries people will rebuild, repair, alter, and inhabit structures around this crossing. But for the person sleeping behind this wall tonight, there is no centuries, long story. There is only the house, perhaps a bed, perhaps another person breathing nearby. Perhaps the sound of the Thames beneath them has been present every night they can remember. You move your hand away. A little warmth remains on the wood for no more than a moment. Then the cold takes it back. Southwark is closer now. The far end of the bridge no longer feels theoretical. Beyond the last inhabited stretch, another London waits, not quite the city, but tied to it by movement, work, travellers, drink, lodging, and roads leading farther south. The character of those roads can be felt even before you leave the bridge. An inn has reason to remain awake later than an ordinary household. Travellers arrive tired. Horses need shelter. Food and ale may still be wanted after shops have closed. A fire in such a place is not only domestic comfort, it is part of the business. You see evidence ahead, a warmer glow. Larger than the tiny household lights you have passed, the illumination does not brighten the bridge from end to end, but it marks the southern approach with the promise of human activity. As you draw nearer, sounds accompany it. A horse stamps once, harness shifts, a man's voice, then another. No shouting, no revelry, only people still awake because travellers and animals do not arrange their journeys perfectly around darkness. The smell of stable straw reaches you before the end of the bridge. Wet hay or straw, horse, leather, dung, wood smoke. I'll somewhere beyond. The air feels more inhabited again. Not busier in the daytime sense, just awake. A cart stands near shelter, its shape barely visible. One wheel catches a little firelight and shines along the wet rim. The horse associated with it is already under cover. Its body gives off warmth into the cold night, a soft animal heat that changes the smell of the space around it. Someone runs a hand along the animal's side, a quiet gesture, practical, reassuring perhaps to both of them. The horse lowers its head, you continue past. Behind you, the center of the bridge is already becoming dark again. Ahead, Southwark gathers itself around the road. The transition off the bridge is less dramatic than entering Aldgate had been. No great sensation of crossing a threshold. Instead, the buildings slowly change relationship to the road. The river remains close, but you are descending from the strange, suspended neighbourhood above it toward ground that belongs once more to yards, lanes, houses, workshops, and inns. Your feet recognize the change before your eyes do. The surface becomes less uniformly hard. Wet earth returns. Mud. Water collected in shallow depressions. After so long on stone, the softness feels almost unfamiliar. You have crossed the Thames. Behind you, London Bridge stretches north toward the city, its houses hiding most of the river from anyone still walking upon it. From here, the bridge seems heavier, a dark inhabited mass laid across moving water. Beyond it rises London. You stop once more and look back. The city does not resemble the enormous London that will someday spread for miles in every direction. Its darkness has edges. Its walls still matter. Its gates still matter. Its river crossing can still be named in the singular, and yet from Southwark it already appears vast enough. Church towers break the roofline. Smoke drifts above unseen hearths. A few lights remain along the water. Most of the rest is shadow. Somewhere within it stands Aldgate, where you entered hours ago. You cannot distinguish it now. The city has swallowed the route behind you. Perhaps journeys are always like this. The path feels obvious while you are walking it. Later, distance gathers over it until only a few moments remain clear. A gate, a smell of bread, rain against a shutter, a warm room glimpsed from outside, the first sight of the river. Human memory keeps fragments and lets the road between them disappear. The wind turns colder. You face south again. An inn doorway stands open farther along the road, spilling orange light into the wet night. A traveller enters. The door remains open just long enough for you to hear the inside clearly. Low voices. A wooden cup placed on a table. The crackle of a fire. Then the door closes. You continue past rather than entering. The warmth is tempting, but the night has become quieter now, and quiet itself has begun to feel like shelter. Beyond the inns, Southwark darkens quickly. Not every doorway holds a light. Not every house remains awake. A dog crosses the road and disappears beneath an overhang. Water drips into a barrel or trough somewhere nearby. The sound is slow. Drop, a pause, drop. A church bell from the northern bank arrives faintly across the Thames. It seems farther away than it did on the bridge. Soon another bell answers from somewhere nearer the southern side. For a few breaths, the two banks are connected by sound rather than stone. Then both fade. You walk a little farther into Southwark. The hour has become difficult to measure. There is no clock face glowing above the street. No number in your pocket. Time is carried differently, by bells, by fires burning lower, by shops closed, by the absence of carts, by the fact that most children are sleeping now, by the watch moving through darker streets, by a tavern that is quieter than it was earlier, by bread that has not yet begun to bake for morning. Night reveals its depth through human habits, and the habits around you say that evening has passed. This is something later. Not yet the deepest hour, but close enough that London's daytime world feels very far away. You find a place beneath the projecting edge of a building where the remaining drops cannot reach you. From here, through the gaps in Southwark's buildings, a small portion of the bridge can still be seen. You stand without moving. Your breathing slows. The wool around you is cold and damp, but the rain has finally stopped. For the first time since approaching Aldgate, nothing is falling from the sky. Only droplets left behind by the storm continue descending from the roofs, one, then another. The night has become very still, and across the river, London is slowly giving itself to sleep. Across the river, one of London's lights disappears, then another. From where you stand beneath the projecting timber floor in Southwark, the northern bank has become little more than a dark arrangement of roofs and towers. The bridge still reaches toward it, but even the houses built upon the crossing seem to be sinking slowly into the night. You remain sheltered for another moment. The dripping has almost stopped. A final drop gathers somewhere above your shoulder, hesitates at the edge of the timber, then falls into the mud. After it, nothing. The silence left by the rain is deeper than the silence that existed before it. For hours, water has filled every empty space in the city. It has tapped against shutters, struck tiles, poured from roof edges, whispered along gutters, softened conversations, and followed you from the road outside Aldgate all the way across the Thames. Now that it is gone, London seems to be listening to itself. You step back into the road. Southwark lies quietly around you. Its relationship with the city is intimate, but not identical. The bridge binds the two together, yet the southern settlement lies outside the city's walls and much of its direct jurisdiction. Travellers arriving from roads to the south find lodging here. Inns gather where movement creates demand. Workshops, brew houses, households, stables, and businesses settle around the approach to the bridge. At this hour, however, those distinctions exist mostly behind closed doors. The road ahead is dark. An inn farther back still shows light around its entrance, but you have moved beyond its warmest glow. The sounds from the yard fade with each step until the horses, cups, voices, and fire are replaced by quieter things. Your own feet, water beneath them, a dog shaking rain from its coat somewhere in the darkness. The animal's collar or chain makes a brief metallic sound. Then stillness returns. The mud here holds the evening differently from the stone bridge. Your steps sink slightly, not far, just enough to make each movement softer. Where carts have travelled, shallow tracks collect water. The sky is too dark to reflect in the puddles, so they appear as patches of deeper blackness until your foot finds one. Cold water enters around the edge of a shoe. You stop. There is nothing to be done. After a night this wet, one more damp step changes very little. You continue. A little farther along, the road passes buildings that seem more closed than those near the bridge. Their facades give almost nothing back to the darkness. No candle beneath a shutter. No open doorway. Only timber, plaster, and the faint outline of an overhanging upper floor. Inside, someone breathes. That is enough to alter how you see the wall. A dark building is not empty simply because you cannot see its inhabitants. It may hold an entire household in sleep. Perhaps several people share a room. Perhaps servants lie elsewhere within the structure. Perhaps an apprentice has a pallet close to the world of work that will reclaim him when morning comes. Perhaps someone sleeps on bedding filled with straw or chaff beneath woolen coverings, while in a wealthier chamber not far away, better mattresses, linen, curtains, and warmer furnishings make the same autumn night feel very different. Night does not erase inequality. It merely hides its surfaces. The same cold air exists outside every house, but walls differ, fires differ, blankets differ, space differs. A wealthy merchant in the city and a labourer sleeping south of the river may hear the same weather and inhabit entirely different degrees of comfort. Yet sleep itself is harder to divide by rank. Eventually a head becomes heavy. A conversation ends. A candle is extinguished. Darkness enters the room. And even wealth must surrender consciousness for a few hours. You pass a small yard. The gate is closed, but not solid enough to hide everything within. A horse stands beneath shelter. You hear it before seeing any part of it. A slow exhalation, then the shift of a hoof through straw. The smell rises from the enclosure, warm animal, wet leather, damp straw, dung. It is almost comforting now. Not pleasant in the delicate sense. Familiar. The smell of something alive and sheltered. Perhaps the horse has worked through rain for much of the day. Perhaps tomorrow it will work again. Tonight there is hay, relative dryness and stillness. Its world has narrowed to the stable. Yours has narrowed to the road. Above the roofs, no stars are visible. Clouds remain even though the rain has moved away. Without moonlight, the darkness between buildings is nearly complete. You raise your eyes anyway. For the people sleeping around you, the sky has many meanings when it can be seen. Season, weather, light, the passage of hours. But tonight the clouds have removed those signs. Time must be felt elsewhere. A bell sounds, very faint. It may come from a religious house or church whose tower you cannot see. The note reaches you without offering a number. That is enough. The medieval night does not need to divide itself neatly into modern hours for the people inside it to know that it is passing. Some bells belong to worship. Some public timekeeping exists. But most lives are also measured by sequence. After supper, after curfew, after the fire is lowered, before dawn, before market, before the ovens are hot. Time lives inside actions. Perhaps that is why waiting feels different here. No glowing minute changes above a doorway. No hand advances visibly around a face you are watching. The night simply deepens. You continue south only a little farther before turning into a quieter lane. The bridge can no longer be seen. For the first time since you crossed it, London is hidden entirely. This small loss of sight changes the night. You are no longer looking back at the city. You are simply inside another group of buildings, among people who have their own reasons for being here. A faint smell of ale survives near one doorway. The building is closed. Earlier there may have been drinking and talk within. Now only the odor remains in damp timber and earth. A little farther away, smoke descends from a chimney or roof opening and settles low in the cold air. You breathe it in. Wood, then something bitter mixed at the edge of it. You cannot know from darkness which fire produced which smoke, and there is no reason to try. The city's atmosphere is made by many hearths at once, each one private. Together, they become weather. This too is a kind of human landscape, not a forest of trees, a forest of fires, thousands of small acts of burning that cook food, warm hands, dry clothing, light rooms, support trades, and send their traces into the same night sky. You move beneath another overhang. A shutter above you makes a soft noise. Someone inside turns in bed, perhaps disturbing it. Or perhaps the wind moves the wood. There is no way to know. The uncertainty feels gentle. You do not need an answer to every sound. A sleeper would not seek one. A city at night is full of events too small to investigate. A cup settling on wood, a mouse in stored grain, a dog scratching, a child murmuring, a coal collapsing in a hearth, a draught moving a shutter. The ordinary world becomes mysterious only because darkness removes the source. You walk more slowly. The hour encourages it. The road has become empty enough that haste would seem strange. Every few steps, you pause simply because there is no reason not to. The cold has changed too. While the rain was falling, wetness dominated everything. Now the damp clothes themselves begin to cool more deeply. Your cloak feels heavy around the shoulders. The wool has protected you, but it has also collected the night. Water, smoke, mud at the hem. The faint odors of places you passed hours ago. If clothing could remember, yours would contain the entire route. The countryside outside Aldgate, Cornhill, Cheapside, Bread Street, the fish-heavy air of the waterfront, the bridge, the inn-yard. Now, Southwark. You rub your hands together. Friction brings a little warmth. Not much. Enough The darkness is broken by a narrow line at ground level, light beneath a door. You approach. The smell tells you something before the sound does. Bread, not fresh from an oven yet, something earlier, flour perhaps, stored grain. Yeast and old warmth lingering in a place associated with baking. The hour has shifted far enough into night that the city is approaching the point when some people's morning begins before everyone else's. Bakers belong to this strange boundary. Bread must exist when London wakes, and bread takes time. The work that feeds daylight often begins in darkness. You hear movement inside, quiet, deliberate, something wooden placed upon another surface. A scrape, then silence. Perhaps preparation has begun. Perhaps someone has merely awakened. The research of ordinary life survives unevenly, and there is no need to force certainty into what the door will not reveal. It is enough that bakers often work before dawn, enough that the smell of bread has returned to the journey. You remember the first warm scent near Aldgate hours ago. Then bread meant evening, a household drawing inward, food before sleep. Now the same smell points toward morning. The object has not changed. Time has. This is how the night turns without anyone announcing it. The same bell means something different later. The same street becomes another place once crowds vanish. The same loaf belongs first to supper, then to breakfast. A city is transformed by hours without moving a single wall. You leave the baker's door behind. A church or religious house lies somewhere deeper in the dark. You cannot see it, but after a while you hear voices. They are very faint. Not conversation, a measured sound. Prayer perhaps, carried only far enough to reach you when the wind moves correctly. Then it fades. Religious communities do not sleep exactly as ordinary households do. The hours of prayer divide darkness and daylight, according to rhythms in which waking during the night is not an interruption, but part of devotion. Somewhere, while merchants sleep and apprentices dream, another group of people stands or kneels beneath stone or timber, speaking words into candlelit darkness. They are awake for a different reason from the watch, different again from the baker, different from the innkeeper. Night does not create one hidden London. It creates many. The London of those protecting it. The London of those praying. The London of those working. The London of those ill or caring for someone. The London of animals in stables. The London of sleepers, all occupying the same darkness without seeing one another. Perhaps no city is ever truly one city. Daylight only makes the illusion easier. A gust enters the lane. Cold air moves against your face, and with it comes something almost forgotten, the Thames. You cannot see the river from here, but its damp presence reaches through the buildings. A wide body of moving water just beyond them. You turn back toward the north, not all the way to the bridge yet, only enough to follow a lane that gradually returns you toward the river. The mud gives way in places to firmer ground. Buildings begin to open slightly. Then, through a gap, the northern bank returns. London is darker than before. There are fewer points of fire along the water. The city's silhouette remains, but its human lights are withdrawing. A tower, a roof, another tower, smoke, black river. For a moment there is no sound from either bank except water, and then, somewhere very far away, a dog barks. Another answers from the city. The river lies between them. You stand listening until both animals are quiet. The world seems enormous again, not because London has grown, because Almost everyone is asleep. Human voices make cities feel small. Without them, the spaces between houses, streets, banks, and towers return. The Thames feels wider, the sky higher, the darkness deeper. You begin moving toward the bridge once more, not quickly. There will be hours yet before true dawn, but the night has crossed some invisible center. Behind closed doors, fires are lower. Ahead, the first ovens will slowly begin to warm, and somewhere across the black water, the sleeping city waits for sounds it does not yet know are coming. The first sounds of morning are so small that they could easily be mistaken for the remains of night. A piece of wood moved somewhere behind a wall, a latch lifted. The faint scrape of something heavy across a floor. Then silence again. You continue toward the bridge with the Thames appearing and disappearing between Southwark's dark buildings. Nothing in the sky suggests dawn. The clouds remain thick and without color, and the river beneath them is still almost black. If you judged only by light, the night might seem unchanged, but London is beginning to move in ways darkness cannot hide. The baker you passed earlier was only one sign. Now, from another building, comes the dry knock of wood against wood. Farther away, a door opens and remains open long enough for a dim glow to spread over the muddy ground. A servant steps outside. The figure carries something close to the body, moves quickly across a yard, then disappears through another entrance. The doorway closes. The light is gone, yet something has begun. This is the hour when the sleeping city and the working city overlap. Most people still lie beneath blankets. Most shutters remain fastened. Most streets belong to darkness. But a smaller population is already preparing the world they will wake into. Fires need coaxing back to strength. Bread needs time. Animals must be attended. Water must be carried. Food must be prepared. Religious offices continue according to their own rhythm. None of these things waits for sunrise before becoming necessary. You approach the southern entrance of London Bridge again. The inn near the road is quieter now than when you first passed it, though a stable hand seems to be awake. You hear the scrape of a fork or tool through straw. A horse breathes heavily. Another shifts against timber. The warmth of the animals has created a different air beneath the shelter. Richer with damp straw and leather than the cold road outside, a lantern hangs nearby. Its flame is weak. The person working does not need more. He knows the space. Perhaps that is another difference between your eyes and his. You require light to understand where you are. He requires only enough light not to stumble. Memory illuminates the rest. He knows where the wall ends, where a halter hangs, where the horse stands, where the ground becomes uneven. Familiar places are never as dark as unfamiliar ones. You leave him to his work. The bridge receives you again. Its roadway feels even emptier than before. The small noises of the houses have diminished. Behind most shutters, inhabitants still sleep while the Thames continues its endless labor below them. You cross northward now. The direction itself changes the feeling of the bridge. Earlier, each step carried you away from the city. Now London grows before you again. At first, it is only a silhouette. Then a few towers become distinguishable. One roofline separates itself from another. A faint band of smoke lies above the northern bank. No dawn yet. Only darkness acquiring detail. You pass the chapel once more. Its stone is colder, looking in this hour, its wet exterior almost without reflection. Somewhere within London's religious communities, prayer continues while the ordinary households around them remain asleep. The bells that organize such lives do not exist merely to tell an abstract hour. They call people toward actions. Rise, pray, return, wait, begin again. The medieval night is divided by obligations more often than by numbers. On the bridge, you feel this more clearly than anywhere else. Beneath you the river follows another clock entirely. Tide, current, return. No bell changes it. No shutter stops it. You come to an opening between bridge houses and pause. Upstream, the darkness appears softer than it did earlier. Perhaps the clouds are thinning somewhere beyond sight. Perhaps your eyes have simply adapted. Either way, the river has begun to show texture. Small ridges appear on the surface. A moving patch of paler darkness. The wake of nothing you can see. Then a boat emerges near the northern bank, not beneath the dangerous bridge arches. Farther away, its form is little more than a dark shape against dark water, moving slowly enough that you first wonder whether it is moving at all. A person aboard shifts. The boat changes angle, then continues. The river will become busy again later. Goods will move. People will cross. Watermen will work the familiar reaches. Wharves will regain voices, ropes, footsteps, bargaining and wait. For now, the boat remains almost private, one person, one craft, one dark river. You continue toward the city. The houses on the bridge begin showing tiny signs of waking. Not many. A shutter moves above you but does not open fully. Light appears behind a crack. Someone coughs inside. Then the building settles again. Perhaps the person has risen. Perhaps only briefly. There is no need to decide. Sleep does not end cleanly. It loosens. A person wakes, turns, listens, closes their eyes. Another rises immediately because work demands it. Another lies awake, waiting for a bell. The universal night contains thousands of private mornings. Nearer the northern end, the smell of smoke grows stronger. Fresh fires, not the old, cool smoke lingering from supper. This smoke has heat behind it. Somewhere wood has just been added to embers. A room is growing warmer. A pot may soon hang over flame. Damp clothing abandoned near a hearth hours ago may finally feel dry enough to wear. The city is rebuilding its warmth one fire at a time. You step off the bridge onto the northern bank. Thames Street receives you differently now. When you first reached it, evening activity was withdrawing from the waterfront. Now the same place waits at the opposite edge of sleep. Doors remain closed, but some of them will open soon. The empty baskets at Billingsgate have not moved. Barrels remain where you saw them. Ropes are still dark with moisture, but the waterfront no longer feels abandoned. It feels expectant. A man emerges from a doorway carrying a lantern. Another follows. Their movements are purposeful but quiet. No market cry, yet no crowded quay. Only preparation. One checks something near a stack of goods. The other disappears toward the river. The silence is being rearranged. You walk west along Thames Street. Your route now begins folding back into the city. This is not a return in the ordinary sense. The places are the same, but the night has altered them so completely that they might belong to another town. Billingsgate without daytime trade was one place. Billingsgate waiting for trade is another. The difference exists almost entirely in anticipation. A basket that seemed abandoned an hour ago now seems ready. A closed door now seems temporary. A dark quay now feels as though footsteps will soon fill it. Time changes objects without touching them. A narrow lane rises away from the river. You turn into it. The houses close around you again, shielding you from the river wind. The cold remains, but it no longer cuts as sharply through the wet cloak. Somewhere above, a shutter opens a few inches, not enough for you to see inside. Enough for stale indoor air to escape. Smoke, human breath, damp wool. The concentrated smell of people who have spent the night in a closed room. Then the shutter remains slightly open. Perhaps someone is testing the weather. No rain. That alone may feel like good news. A cat slips across the lane. You see it only when it passes through a strip of light beneath a doorway. Its body appears. 4 quiet steps. Then disappears. For much of the night, animals seem to wait with the city. Now they too begin to move. A dog sniffs along the base of a building. A horse farther uphill makes itself known with a brief stamp. Somewhere a bird gives one uncertain call from beneath an eave. It does not continue. Morning has not arrived strongly enough for a chorus. But the sound is new. You stop. Listen, nothing follows. The little call seems almost premature. Yet perhaps dawn always begins this way. Not with light, with mistakes. One bird calling too soon. One worker opening a door before anyone else. One fire lit while the neighborhood remains cold. One cart prepared while the street is empty. Morning begins as an exception. Then the exceptions multiply. You continue uphill. Ahead, somewhere toward the commercial streets you crossed earlier, bread is beginning to change from preparation into smell. This time it is stronger. Warm yeast. Grain. The first unmistakable suggestion of baking. The scent travels through the cold lane and meets you before you can identify the building responsible. It seems almost impossible that something so soft can move through so much darkness. But smell needs no daylight. You follow it without deliberately choosing to. The road rises. Your legs are tired now. Not exhausted, only aware of the distance behind them. Hours of wet streets have accumulated in your body. The heavy cloak presses on your shoulders. Your shoes remain damp. Cold has become familiar enough that you notice warmth more easily than discomfort. And the smell of bread is warm even before you reach the oven. A faint orange glow appears around a door. The baker's world is awake. Inside, figures move around work surfaces. You see only fragments when the door opens. Flour on timber. Hands. A bowl. Fire deeper within. Then someone carries something across your view, and the door closes again. The sight lasts only seconds, but it contains the beginning of London's day. Soon bread will leave rooms like this and move outward into households, shops, streets, and markets. People who are sleeping now will eat the work being done while they sleep. They may never think of the darkness that produced it. Much of civilization is like that. The visible day rests upon invisible hours. Someone works before you wake. Someone guards while you sleep. Someone keeps fire. Someone prays. Someone tends an animal. Someone prepares food. Morning arrives already carrying the labor of the night inside it. You move on before the bakery can become the center of the journey. The smell follows. Up ahead, the city remains mostly dark, but the quality of darkness is changing. The clouds above the roofs are no longer perfectly black. There is gray somewhere within them. Very little, enough that roof lines no longer vanish completely into the sky. You can see the angle of a gable, the edge of a tower, a chimney or smoke opening, the upper floor of a house leaning over the street. Details return slowly, and with them, London begins to emerge from the night not as the city you entered, but as one washed by rain. Timber is dark with water. Plaster has deepened in tone. Puddles lie undisturbed in hollows. The street signs hang motionless now that the wind has softened. Everything seems newly made. You hear another bird. This one is answered, not immediately. A few moments later, somewhere across the roofs, you smile without needing to. It is still night, but no longer entirely. Far behind you, the Thames moves beneath London Bridge. Ahead, fires are waking in the city, and above the wet roofs, the first colourless hint of morning begins to gather inside the clouds. The grey above the roofs does not brighten so much as spread. At first it seemed no more than a thinness inside the clouds, a place where darkness had become less complete. Now it begins to occupy more of the eastern sky, revealing edges that have been hidden for hours. A roof, a chimney opening, the upper frame of a shutter, water beaded along timber. London returns by surfaces. You continue uphill, leaving the warmer breath of the bakery behind you. The smell follows for a while. Fresh bread has not yet filled the streets, but somewhere dough is meeting heat, and the quiet transformation taking place behind walls gives the cold air a softer edge. Soon another smell joins it, smoke from newly strengthened fires. Earlier in the night, smoke belonged to evening meals and rooms, closing themselves against the rain. Then it thinned as fires were lowered and households slept. Now it rises again. A second tide. One household rekindles its hearth. Then another. Thin trails climb between the roofs and disappear into the low cloud. Morning is being made from below as much as above. The sky gives light. The houses give smoke. Between them, London begins another day. A door opens ahead. A servant emerges carrying a vessel. There is no lantern this time. The dim natural light is finally sufficient for someone who knows the street. The figure pauses briefly, looks upward at the weather, then moves away. You realize how significant that simple absence is. For most of the night, anyone outside who needed to see carried flame. Now the sky itself is slowly taking over the work. Not enough to reveal color, enough to reveal shape. The human city can begin releasing its candles. You pass a puddle and, for the first time, it reflects something other than darkness or fire. The clouds. A pale grey patch lies within the water at your feet. Your boot disturbs it. The little sky breaks into ripples and becomes mud again. Ahead another shutter opens. Then another farther along. Neither is thrown wide. Morning enters houses cautiously. Cold air enters with it. Inside one room, perhaps someone has just risen from bedding and stepped onto a floor chilled through the night. Perhaps the first task is the fire. Perhaps the next is water. Ordinary mornings rarely begin with thoughts about the century in which they occur. The body asks simpler questions. Is it cold? Is there food? What must be done? Who is already awake? These questions have survived almost unchanged through every city you have ever known. A cock calls somewhere beyond the buildings. The sound is clearer than the birds you heard earlier. Then another bird answers from a roof. Soon there are several. Not a great dawn chorus. Only scattered claims upon the morning. A wing beats against wet air. Something lands on a roof ridge. A pigeon shifts under the eaves. Animals recognize the changing light before the street becomes busy enough for people to dominate it. You continue northward. The road gradually brings you back toward the streets around Bread Street and Cheapside, but approaching them now feels nothing like leaving them last night. Then trade was collapsing inward. Wooden stalls were being covered, shutters closed, workers disappeared. Now the direction has reversed. A board is carried outward, a door is propped open. Someone sweeps or clears a small area near a threshold. Another person moves something from an interior toward the street. The gestures echo those of evening, but in reverse order. Cities breathe this way, inward at night, outward at morning, and between the two a few dark hours in which the streets belong to water, watchmen, prayer, animals, and anyone whose work cannot wait for daylight. You reach a broader stretch where the remnants of market activity from yesterday are easier to see. Rain has flattened straw and scraps against the ground. The gutters still carry small amounts of water. Mud has settled rather than vanished. Mourning does not make the street clean. It merely makes its condition visible. A man bends near a drainage channel and clears something obstructing the flow. Water moves suddenly. A little stream that had been trapped behind debris finds its way forward. The action lasts only moments. Then the man stands and moves on. No grand system reveals itself, only maintenance. Someone noticing that water should go somewhere and helping it do so. This is part of city life too. Not the dramatic filth imagined from centuries away. Not impossible cleanliness either. Waste exists. Dung exists. Mud exists. Regulations exist. People complain. People clear things. People ignore things. People are fine. The medieval street, like most human environments, lives somewhere between rule and disorder. The night's rain has made that negotiation visible everywhere. A horse passes slowly. Its hooves press into softened ground, leaving fresh marks among those from yesterday. The animal is pulling a cart that is lightly loaded for now. Wooden wheels turn through the damp street. A man walks beside it rather than riding. Morning's first cart does not sound like the carts of evening. Then it was one more noise among many. Now every creak seems to announce that traffic is returning. The horse moves ahead. Its smell remains briefly. Wet hide, leather, mud. Then bread overtakes it. Much stronger now. Somewhere nearby, finished loaves are beginning to emerge. You see an apprentice carrying several. They are not arranged for a picturesque scene. They are work, food, inventory, something produced while most of London slept. The young man moves quickly through the chill, shoulders slightly raised against the cold. He disappears through another doorway. For a moment, you imagine the loaf reaching a table later this morning, hands tearing it, a bowl beside it, perhaps cheese, perhaps something warm. The person eating it may know the baker, may not, may never think of the hour at which the oven was lit. This is how a city connects strangers. One person's darkness becomes another person's breakfast. You move toward Cheapside. The wider market space begins to appear through the increasingly useful light. Its structures are no longer silhouettes. Wood has color again, though subdued beneath the overcast sky. Brown timber, pale plaster, dark wool, earth turned almost black by rain. The Eleanor Cross stands within the awakening space, no longer lost in darkness. The great conduit waits for the city's need of water. But neither is treated as a monument by the people beginning work around them. A woman comes with a vessel. Another person crosses behind her. Water will be carried into houses, kitchens, shops, and workshops. It has weight. Every vessel brought home has been lifted and transported by someone. A city drinks through human arms. You watch for a moment as morning turns infrastructure into movement. Water itself is invisible once carried away, but effort is not. Hands grip, shoulders adjust. Steps become careful on the wet ground. The same rain that fell freely from the sky all night does not make household water unnecessary. Rain belongs everywhere. Useful water must be gathered where it can be handled. Another reminder that abundance and access are not the same thing. A bell sounds. This time the city seems more prepared to answer it. A second tower takes up the morning from elsewhere, then another tone farther away. The bells travel across roofs now visible enough to locate roughly in space. The night had made them mysterious. Morning gives them buildings. This one somewhere beyond the market, another behind you, another perhaps nearer St. Paul's. The great cathedral exists above the dense urban fabric, part of a skyline crowded by parish towers and religious buildings. You do not need to approach it. Its presence belongs to the city around you. People orient themselves through landmarks they have seen thousands of times. A spire, a tower, a market cross, a conduit, the bridge, the wall. For you, each seems historical. For Londoners, each simply helps tell them where they are. The daylight strengthens almost imperceptibly. You can see faces now before people come close. A merchant better dressed than the labourer beside him. A servant carrying something carefully. An apprentice rubbing sleep from one eye before noticing his master and straightening slightly. Differences of status reappear with colour and detail. Fine cloth, fur trim where wealth allows, better shoes, a more substantial gown. The night had hidden much of this. Morning restores society's visible layers. But everyone shares the same breath in the cold air, the same wet street beneath them, the same low clouds. A man lifts a shutter, another secures an awning or covering. A stall begins to take form. Cheapside is returning, not rapidly. There is no instant in which the marketplace suddenly becomes crowded. The process gathers by addition: one worker, a cart, a servant, a merchant, a horse, another stall opening, a voice calling to someone only a few yards away, then another voice. Soon conversation no longer seems unusual. The city is moving from isolated sounds toward a continuous murmur. This is the opposite of what happened last night. You remember standing here while the market emptied. Every remaining noise then acquired more room around it. Now the spaces are filling again. Morning shortens the silence between people. You stand near the edge of the market and listen as the transformation builds wooden boards. Footsteps, hooves, a bucket or vessel set down, a door, a cough, birds above, a bell farther away. The low human murmur beneath them all. The rain itself is missing. Its absence has become one of the morning's quiet pleasures. Roofs still drip occasionally, but no fresh water falls from the clouds. The wet city is finally being allowed to dry. Not quickly. Autumn gives little warmth for that, but movement will help. Doors opening, fires burning, bodies filling rooms. Clothing hung near heat, air circulating where shutters remained closed through the night. Across London, dampness is slowly being negotiated away. You walk east from Cheapside, retracing part of the route toward Cornhill. The street is more recognizable now, and yet the familiarity is strange because you saw it first under entirely different conditions. A doorway that contained warm firelight in the evening is now open to grey morning. A shopfront that vanished behind shutters has become a workplace again. The building did not change, only its relationship with light. Perhaps places are never one thing. A tavern at noon is not the tavern at midnight. A bridge in rain is not the bridge before dawn. A market after closing is not the same space at opening. Time is another form of architecture. It builds invisible rooms around the same stone and timber. You pass the place where, hours earlier, laughter escaped briefly from a warm interior. Now there is no laughter. Someone is cleaning or arranging the room. A trestle table is moved. Wood scrapes against the floor. The hearth is being brought back to life. Last night's comfort becomes today's work. You continue. Ahead, Cornhill is emerging into a clearer morning. The clouds above it have turned from charcoal to pale iron. No sunlight breaks through them. There may be no golden dawn at all, only gradual visibility. That seems appropriate after a rainy night. The world does not need spectacle to return. A grey morning is still morning. A shopkeeper raises a shutter. For a moment he stands in the opening, looking out at the street that has existed without him for hours. Perhaps he notices the puddles, perhaps the cleared sky, perhaps nothing beyond the day's first task. Then he turns back inside. Behind him, someone brings goods forward. The rhythm continues, and you begin to understand that the journey through this night will not end when the darkness does. London will simply carry on. The baker will sell bread. The market will fill. The bridge will thicken with traffic. Boats will work the Thames. Smoke will rise. Church bells will sound again. Rain may return later. Another evening will eventually close the shutters you are watching open now. The city does not know that anyone has spent the night observing it. It asks for no conclusion. Ahead, toward the eastern streets, the pale morning spreads farther across the wet roofs. And somewhere beyond Cornhill, Aldgate waits in the new light. Aldgate is still some distance away, but the road toward it has begun to remember daylight. More shutters are open now. The grey sky enters rooms that have spent the night by hearth and candle, and figures appear briefly at windows or doorways before turning back toward whatever the morning requires of them. The change is not hurried. London wakes by accumulation. A broom or bundle moves across a threshold. A bucket is carried into a yard. Someone calls from one shop to another. A horse shakes its head, making harness fittings sound for a moment in the cool air. Then a cart rolls past, heavier than the one you heard earlier. Its wheels press water from shallow ruts and send thin fans of mud toward the edges of the street. People step aside. The city has returned to negotiating space. Last night, darkness made the road feel wider because so few people occupied it. Now each new body narrows it again. A servant, 2 apprentices, a man beside a horse, someone carrying bread beneath a covering, another person with a basket. Soon you are no longer walking through an empty street with occasional company. You are walking through London. The difference is almost entirely made of people. The buildings have stood in the same places all night. Yet every doorway that opens changes them. Every voice makes the timber seem less severe. Every movement turns architecture back into habitation. A shop near Cornhill has its frontage open now. Goods are being arranged where daylight can reach them. The apprentice doing the work looks younger in the morning than the shadowed figures you saw last evening. Perhaps darkness had made everyone seem older. His hood is down, his hair is untidy. He lifts one object, pauses while his master says something from within, then changes where he places it. There is nothing romantic about the exchange. Someone knows how the shop should look. Someone else is learning. This is how trades continue. Not only through guild rules, documents, property, and money, but through repeated gestures witnessed by younger hands. Where to place something, how to judge its quality, which customer can be trusted, how much material a task requires, when to begin, when to stop. Skills live inside people long before they enter records. You walk past while the lesson continues without noticing you. The air is changing again. The cold remains, but activity has warmed the smells of the street. Bread is everywhere now, joining smoke from hearths and the dampness left by rain. Somewhere meat or another savory food begins cooking. Elsewhere, the sour trace of owl escapes through an open door. Leather grows stronger near one frontage, wet wool near another. The morning city has more distinct odors than the night because doors are opening and work is coming outside. Rain had mixed London together. Morning separates it. A trade here. Food there a stable beyond. Smoke above. The human nose could find its way through parts of the city almost as well as the eye. You approach another drainage channel. Water still runs slowly through it, carrying small fragments from yesterday toward lower ground. A person steps over it without looking. You follow. What seemed worth observing in darkness has already become ordinary again. This may be one of morning's quiet losses. Night made every sound and surface noticeable. Daylight allows people to stop noticing. A gutter is only a gutter when you can see where it leads. A wall is only a wall when its whole shape is visible. The mysterious becomes practical. Perhaps sleep and waking perform something similar inside the mind. At night, a thought can become enormous because nothing surrounds it. By morning it returns to its proper size among breakfast, clothing, work, weather, and other people. London, too, is recovering proportion. The Thames no longer feels like endless black water. It is a river behind you. The bridge is once again a road. The bells have towers. The darkness beneath overhanging houses has become shadow, and the rain that seemed to encompass the whole world is now only wet timber and mud beneath your feet. A group of people crosses the street ahead. Their clothing reveals more now than it did in darkness. Wool dominates, practical against the cool season. Hoods and gowns take different forms according to means, work and status. One man wears fabric finer than those beside him. Another has clothing marked more clearly by labor. A woman moves along the edge of the street, her pace deliberate on the wet ground. A servant follows someone better dressed. A child appears briefly beside an entrance and is called back inside. The city reorganizes itself visibly. During the night, a distant lantern reduced almost everyone to a moving silhouette. Morning returns names that you still do not know. Merchant, servant, apprentice, craftsman, cleric, laborer. Each role begins to show itself through destination and action as much as clothing. A bell sounds again. This one does not float over silence. It competes gently with wheels, voices, doors, hooves, and birds. Its importance has not diminished. The world around it has simply become louder. You think of the same bell during the night, arriving alone over the river. How enormous it seemed then. Now a man speaks to someone beside you, while the note is still fading. and part of the sound disappears beneath their conversation. Nothing about the bronze has changed, only the city listening to it. A pair of clerical figures moves through the morning farther ahead. They do not transform the street into a religious scene. They belong to it as naturally as merchants and servants. Faith is not somewhere separate from London's waking life. Churches stand within neighborhoods. Bells divide days. Prayer occupies hours. Holy images and crosses exist beside trade and domestic work. A merchant can move from business to worship without believing he has entered another category of existence. The boundaries modern minds often draw between practical life and sacred life are much softer here, and yet even devotion must cross mud. One of the figures adjusts his step around a puddle. For a moment, theology and weather occupy exactly the same piece of ground. You continue east. Cornhill gradually falls behind. The streets toward Aldgate become increasingly active, with people moving inward as well as outward. The gate that felt like a closing threshold last evening is approaching its daytime character once more. Movement, goods, travelers, the exchange between the walled city and the world beyond it. A cart approaches from the east. Its cargo is protected as well as possible from the lingering damp. The horse drawing it has mud along its lower legs. The driver or accompanying man looks tired enough that he may have begun his journey before London's streets woke. He passes you without ceremony. Other people make room. Within moments he is swallowed by the street behind you. His arrival reminds you that London's morning does not begin only inside London. Roads beyond the wall have been carrying people toward it through darkness too. Farmers, carters, travellers, servants, merchants, goods produced beyond sight. The city wakes because the countryside moves toward it as well as because its own inhabitants rise. Food cannot be created by markets. Wood does not grow on Thames Street. Wool does not begin in a merchant's shop. London concentrates the labour of places far beyond its walls. The gate is where some of those worlds meet. You can see Aldgate now, in daylight, or what passes for daylight beneath these low clouds. It seems less mysterious than when you first approached. Last evening, the wall rose dark against the storm. The entrance promised shelter, smoke, crowds, and unknown streets beyond it. Now its masonry and timber are visible. People pass through. The gate belongs to routine. Yet you remember the feeling of standing outside it in the rain. That memory makes the ordinary structure seem to contain two places at once. The gate of evening, the gate of morning. One swallowed people into the city before darkness. The other releases and receives them as work begins. Aldgate itself has not moved. Time has walked through it. The road becomes busier as you near the entrance. A horse brushes close enough that you smell wet hide. Someone carries a bundle against one hip. An apprentice moves rapidly in the opposite direction. Two men speak as they pass under the gate, their conversation already absorbed by the greater noise around them. A dog waits near a wall before following a familiar figure. Above all this, the sky brightens another shade, still grey, still clouded, but unmistakably day. You pass beneath Aldgate. Stone and timber surround you for a few steps. The sound changes under the gate passage. Hooves become sharper. Voices gather a faint echo. Then the eastern road opens ahead. You are outside the walled city again. The place where the journey began is transformed. The muddy road remains. Cart tracks remain. The landscape beyond remains wet from the night's rain, but now you can see farther. Fields and routes emerge through the pale morning. The wall behind you has color and texture. Aldgate is no longer a dark mouth waiting beneath a storm. It is part of the waking boundary of London. You step aside from the immediate flow of traffic and turn back. From outside the wall, much of the city disappears again. You know what lies behind it now. Not because you have learned every street. You have not. Not because you have understood every rule, trade, parish, or household. You have not. You know it in another way. You know how wet wool smells beside a hearth, how a market sounds after everyone leaves, how small one lantern becomes beside the Thames, how London Bridge carries houses over moving water, how deep the streets grow after voices disappear, how bread begins before daylight, how the first open shutter changes the meaning of darkness. Perhaps this is what it means to know a place for one night. Not possession, not mastery, only familiarity with a few of its breaths. The road beyond Aldgate is beginning to fill. Behind you, London continues waking without needing you to return. Cheapside will grow louder. The waterfront will gather labour. Smoke will thicken above houses. Bread will be sold. Water will be carried. Children will wake fully. Apprentices will resume yesterday's work. The watch that owned parts of the night will become less visible as daytime order takes over. And somewhere, in a room above a shop or beside the river, someone who remained awake for most of the dark hours may finally lie down. Morning does not wake everyone. For some, it permits sleep. You turn east for a few steps. The wet road stretches ahead beneath the low sky. Then you hear London behind you. Not one sound, many wheels, hooves, voices, a bell, a dog, wood striking wood. The city has recovered its daytime murmur. Yet beneath all of it, if you listen carefully enough, you can almost remember the rain. Not falling now, only held in the earth, in the darkened wall, in soaked timber, in puddles along the road. The night has not vanished completely. Morning carries traces of it everywhere, and while the first full hour of the waking city gathers behind Aldgate, the clouds remain low above the road, pale and quiet, as though they too have spent the entire night over London. The clouds seem lower once you are beyond the wall. Without the close roofs of the city beneath them, you can see their broad grey weight stretching eastward over the wet road. There is no clear edge where the storm ended during the night and morning began. Only layers of pale cloud moving slowly above darker earth. You walk a little farther from Aldgate. Behind you, traffic continues beneath the gate. It no longer feels like the fragile beginning of morning. The spaces between carts are shorter now. Voices overlap. Horses approach from one direction while pedestrians move in the other, and what had been a handful of separate sounds has become the familiar confusion of a working entrance to the city. You do not need to watch it closely. The sounds are enough. Wooden wheels, hooves, a man calling to another, harness shifting, the dull movement of goods. A bell farther inside London. The city has regained its momentum. Ahead, the road remains quieter. Rainwater rests in the deeper wheel tracks, reflecting a sky almost the same color as itself. Mud clings to the edges where feet and hooves have broken the surface. The fields and open ground beyond the suburban buildings carry the night's moisture without the complicated smells of the streets. Here the air is simpler, wet soil, grass, wood smoke drifting out from London, perhaps the faint smell of animals. The contrast reminds you of how strongly the city announced itself before you entered it. Hours ago, approaching this same wall in rain, you smelled London before knowing anything within it. Smoke, food, animals, wet timber, thousands of human lives compressed behind stone. Now those smells weaken with every step eastward. The city does not end at the gate in every practical sense. Roads, buildings, travellers, fields, and settlements connected to the countryside beyond, but the wall still creates a feeling of separation. Inside, density. Outside, space. Inside, voices meeting walls and returning. Outside, sound travelling farther before it finds anything to strike. A cart coming toward London can be heard long before it reaches you. At first only the wheels, then the horse, then the figure beside it becomes clear. The load is ordinary, protected against the damp where necessary. Nothing about it suggests ceremony or importance. And yet the city behind you depends upon arrivals like this. Markets fill because roads lead somewhere. Households eat because food comes from beyond their doors. Craftsmen work because raw materials move. Merchants trade because goods travel farther than the people who finally buy them. London may feel self-contained when you walk its narrow lanes, but every morning its gates reveal the opposite. A city is an appetite with walls around it. It draws inward. Grain, animals, wood, cloth, fish from the river, wine and other goods through trade, people looking for work, people carrying news, people returning home. Then it transforms what arrives and sends other things outward again. You do not need to see the entire system. One cart is enough. Its wheels pass close. The horse's hooves press into the damp road. The man beside it nods faintly toward another traveller and continues toward Aldgate. Soon the gate receives them both. The road becomes quiet again. You stop beside a patch of grass darkened by rain. Water collects at the tips. One droplet slides down a blade and disappears into the earth. Such water seemed entirely different on Thames Street. There it mixed with river mud, timber, fish, smoke, refuse, commerce. Here it belongs almost completely to soil. The same rain fell on both. Places change, even weather. Perhaps that is true of memory as well. The rain near Aldgate will not remain in your mind the way the rain on London Bridge will. One belonged to arrival, the other to water beneath water, another belonged to closed markets, another to the sound against shutters while people ate supper. The storm was one event. You experienced many rains. The thought passes as quietly as the droplet. You begin walking back toward the gate. There is no need to leave London behind yet. Morning has opened a different version of the city, and its walls no longer carry the warning of approaching night. As you draw near, you notice the masonry more clearly than before. Weather has darkened portions of stone. Timber remains damp. Small imperfections that darkness erased are visible now. A repaired surface, where countless people have passed. Mud splashed low against the structure. Buildings age at a speed too slow for those living beside them to notice. A stone wall changes across years. A wooden threshold changes beneath thousands of feet. No single traveller sees the transformation, only the marks left behind. Perhaps time is most visible where it has been touched repeatedly, a step hollowed slightly, a door polished where hands find it, a road deepened into ruts. The past rarely announces itself, it accumulates. You pass beneath Aldgate again. The gate passage now holds morning voices. A porter or worker moves something aside to clear room. A horse is guided carefully through the traffic. Someone carrying a basket presses close to the wall until the cart has passed. There is no room for contemplation inside the passage. Everyone simply moves. You move with them. And once more the city closes around you. But daylight has changed its scale. Last night, the first street beyond Aldgate seemed endless because darkness concealed what lay ahead. The projecting upper stories narrowed the sky to a strip, and every doorway promised another unknown interior. Now you can see farther. The lane still bends and tightens. Buildings still crowd the street, yet their surfaces are comprehensible. Timber frames divide pale walls. Shutters expose shop openings. Signs show shape and perhaps painted identity where the weather and light permit. The roofs are simply roofs again. Even the remaining puddles seem smaller. Daylight has not made London larger. It has made the unknown smaller. A woman stands near a frontage arranging goods. A boy carries something from an inner room. Two men speak beside a cart while its horse waits with lowered head. Someone opens an upper shutter and shakes or adjusts a piece of cloth before drawing it back inside. Everywhere, interiors are spilling outward. You remember the opposite movement, the apprentice who closed a shutter as you first entered the city, the line of candlelight beneath wood. The voices becoming muffled as households withdrew. Now walls release those lives again. Morning reverses architecture. A closed house is shelter. An open house becomes part of the street. You continue west. A smell of warm bread reaches you, though now it no longer dominates. The city has awakened enough to surround it with competition, cooked food, wood smoke, animals, leather, the wet remnants of yesterday's commerce, and occasionally something unpleasant rising from mud or drainage where the night's water has gathered what the street would rather lose. No single odor defines London. That seems more important now than it did in darkness. From centuries away, it would be easy to imagine only filth. But no person living here experiences the city through one permanent smell. A bakery interrupts a gutter. Incense interrupts smoke. Rain interrupts dung. Fresh, cut or worked material interrupts river mud. A meal interrupts wet wool. Human life is made of mixtures. Even unpleasant places contain moments of warmth. Even beautiful churches contain damp stone and tired feet. You pass a worker dealing with refuse near a street edge. Nothing about the act is remarkable. That is precisely why it matters. The city produces waste because the city consumes. Someone must move what accumulates. Regulations may order where things should go. People may obey, neglect, complain, or evade them. Those tasked with clearing streets and carrying refuse remain part of the same urban rhythm as merchants arranging valuable goods nearby. Worth and waste travel opposite directions through the same lanes. One is carried inward, the other outward. The city depends upon both movements. A pig makes itself heard somewhere in a yard. You cannot see it. A dog answers with a short bark. The sound draws a laugh from one of the apprentices nearby. For a moment, morning feels almost light despite the clouds. No sunlight is required. Human energy is enough. You keep moving toward Cornhill. More people now recognize one another. Greetings pass across the street. Not grand declarations. A few words between neighbors. A gesture. Someone calling a name. Someone asking something about work. The medieval city is large enough to contain strangers, yet its neighborhoods are also composed of repeated encounters. the same shop, the same parish church, the same well or conduit, the same people passing the same threshold each day. Cities can create anonymity and familiarity at once. You can be unknown to thousands and known to 20. Perhaps those 20 are the real city for most people. A master, a servant, a neighbor, a customer, a priest, a baker. The person whose horse is always in the yard 2 buildings away. The woman who sells something you need. The child who grows taller each year in the doorway across the street. History often remembers London's population as a number, but nobody meets a population, they meet faces. You pass several now, a tired one, a hurried one still softened by sleep, one already focused upon business. The city is becoming individual again. At Cornhill, trade has strengthened since you last crossed it. The morning is no longer waiting. It has begun. Goods stand nearer the street. Shop fronts are open. Movement is continuous enough that you choose your path rather than simply walking through emptiness. A merchant speaks with another man while an apprentice waits beside them. Coins may eventually pass between hands, somewhere here pennies, perhaps smaller or larger silver denominations according to the transaction, each coin carrying purchasing power understood immediately by people who do not need a history of medieval currency explained to them. For an ordinary laborer, small differences matter. Bread has a price. All has a price. Candles have a price. Lodging has a price. Light itself can be measured against earnings. The candle you watched trembling behind a shutter during the night was not merely atmosphere. Someone paid for it. Perhaps that is why darkness was allowed to remain dark. Every flame consumes something: tallow, wax, oil where appropriate, fuel, labor. A household uses what it can afford and what it needs. Even warmth has economics inside it. But this morning no one around you appears to be considering such ideas. A woman counts or examines something at a stall. A man reaches beneath his clothing or belt area for money. An apprentice lifts a bundle. Business exists as gestures rather than theory. You move past before any exchange is complete. A stronger bell rings. The sound falls into a city now fully capable of answering with its own noise. For the first time you notice that you no longer hear every footstep. There are too many. Individual hooves merge into traffic. Voices overlap. Wooden wheels become part of a continuous texture. The quiet London of deep night has disappeared. But you do not feel that you have lost it. You have seen where it goes. It remains hidden inside this morning's city, waiting for evening. The same shopkeeper who raises his voice now will lower it tonight. The same road filled with carts will empty. The same church bell will sound over darker roofs. The same Thames will become black again. The same bridge houses will close their shutters. Nothing has ended. The cycle has merely moved beyond the hours you walked through. You turn slightly southward, where a distant opening between buildings gives only the smallest suggestion of the river. You cannot see London Bridge from here, but somewhere beyond the roofs it carries morning traffic between the city and Southwark. The water below continues. You think of its sound in the middle of the night, the current beneath stone, the houses sleeping above it. For a few breaths you can almost hear it beneath the noise of Cornhill. Perhaps you are only remembering. There is little difference now. Memory has become another sound within the street. You walk on. The clouds begin to loosen enough that one area of the sky turns nearly white. No blue appears. No sunlight breaks dramatically across the roofs. But the pale patch causes wet timber to shine slightly. A puddle brightens. The edge of a roof takes on a faint silver line. After so much darkness, even this weak light feels generous. People continue their work without looking upward. For them, morning is already established. For you, some part of the night remains. And as Cornhill fills around you, the city seems to hold both at once, the wet silence it has just left behind, and the long ordinary day already gathering ahead. The pale patch above Cornhill widens until the wet roofs begin to return small pieces of light. Not sunlight, nothing so warm. Only the quiet brightness of an overcast morning spreading across London, settling on puddles, timber, plaster, and the shoulders of people already absorbed in their work. The long rain has left everything darker than usual. Oak beams seem almost black where water remains in the grain. The pale surfaces between them are stained by dampness. Wooden signs that vanished into the night now hang clearly above the shops, and beneath them the street has become crowded enough that you no longer choose each step in solitude. Someone passes close beside you carrying a basket. Another person moves in the opposite direction. A horse waits while a cart is turned carefully through the available space. You step beneath the edge of a projecting upper floor to let them pass. Hours earlier, you stood beneath such overhangs to escape the rain. Now they offer shade from nothing. The sky itself is gentle. The cart moves on. Its wheels leave fresh lines through the softened street, disturbing water that had lain still since before dawn. For a few seconds, the puddles tremble, then become quiet again. Nearby, a shopkeeper and an apprentice are arranging the beginning of their day. The younger figure carries goods forward while the older one watches, correcting something with a short gesture of the hand. The instruction disappears beneath the noise of the street. You do not need to hear it. The apprentice understands. Tomorrow, perhaps the same correction will not be necessary. Years from now, perhaps another young person will receive the same gesture from him. London carries knowledge this way, hand to hand, eye to eye. A craft may have rules, associations, traditions, and records, but much of what keeps it alive passes through repetition. How something should feel beneath the fingers, how long a task should take, what good work looks like before anyone names the qualities that make it good. The city is full of such knowledge this morning. A baker knows heat, a boatman knows current, a merchant knows cloth or weight or trust. A stable hand knows the mood of a horse before another person sees anything unusual. A servant knows which sound from another room requires attention and which can be ignored. None of them needs to explain the city. They inhabit it through competence. You continue slowly. At the edge of the commercial street, a man handles a piece of material that catches your attention only because of its texture. Leather. The smell reaches you almost immediately. It is richer now that the morning air is moving through open frontages. You remember how the city changed by scent last night. Fish beside the river, wet wool near fire, bread behind walls, mud under rain. Now work itself begins identifying neighborhoods again. Goldsmiths, mercers, fishmongers, vintners, bakers, butchers, brewers, skinners, and other trades belong to a city where occupation can shape the character of a street. Some trades leave pleasant traces. others much less so. The work of preparing hides, handling animals, processing food, brewing, heating fires, storing fish, or cleaning waste creates its own atmosphere. But no smell lasts long while you move. A draft carries smoke across the street, the leather fades, bread returns. Then horse, then damp plaster. London changes every few steps. You reach a place where the morning crowd opens briefly around a small obstruction in the street. Someone has stopped with a load. People do not protest dramatically. They adjust. One passes behind. Another waits. A horse is guided slightly aside. The whole street bends around the difficulty and then closes again once it is gone. Perhaps cities are less like machines than water. They do not need every obstacle removed before continuing. They divide around it, rejoin beyond it. Find another way. You think of the Thames passing through the narrow arches of London Bridge. The comparison lasts only a moment. Then a voice nearby draws your attention back to Cornhill. A merchant is speaking to someone dressed differently from the labourers around him. The language is English, but elsewhere in London other tongues can enter the same commercial world. French still has its places. Latin belongs strongly to church, law, administration, and learning. Foreign merchants bring their own speech. The city listens to more than one language because commerce and movement refuse to remain within neat boundaries. Yet most words disappear as soon as they are spoken. This morning's bargaining will not survive. A greeting between neighbors will not survive. A mother calling a child indoors will not survive. The great majority of human language vanishes into the air that receives it. Perhaps that is why old documents can make the past seem quieter than it was. Written words remain. Spoken lives do not. But around you now, London is anything but mute. A man laughs. Someone argues over something too small for you to understand. An apprentice calls toward a doorway. A seller addresses a potential customer. A child asks a question and receives an answer you cannot hear. The city speaks itself into existence every morning. You walk away from the thickest part of the market and into a lane where the sound softens again. A parish church stands close among houses. In full morning light, it seems less mysterious than the shadowed religious spaces you imagined during the night. Stone, door, roof. A tower rising above the surrounding buildings. People pass it without stopping. Others enter. There is no contradiction in this. The church is both sacred and ordinary because it belongs to repeated life. Bells that seemed almost otherworldly above the sleeping Thames now emerge from buildings with neighbours, gutters, mud, and shop fronts nearby. Faith lives among practical things. Inside, a person may kneel, while outside someone negotiates the price of food. Incense may linger within stone while dung is cleared from the street beyond. A prayer may rise while a cart wheel catches in soft ground. No wall can truly divide these worlds. The same people move between them. You pass the church entrance without going inside. A faint waxy smell reaches the doorway. Cold masonry holds the night's dampness. For only a few breaths, the street noise behind you seems distant. Then another person enters and the moment breaks. You continue. A little farther on, the city shows another side of morning. A woman stands at the threshold of a house with a child beside her. The child is wrapped against the cool air and watches the passing street with the unguarded attention of someone for whom almost everything is worth looking at. A horse, a basket, a wheel, You pass within a few yards. The child's gaze follows movement rather than people. Perhaps adults learn to see cities by purpose. Where am I going? What must I buy? Who do I need to meet? Children can still see a wheel turning simply because it turns. The thought stays with you as the pair disappear behind the movement of others. Somewhere close by, a servant empties or carries household material toward the proper place for removal. Elsewhere, another person brings water inward. The two motions cross. Clean water toward the house, waste away from it. Again, the city is made not only by what it possesses, but by what it moves. London must be fed, supplied, cleaned imperfectly, heated, repaired, watched. Its fires require fuel. Its horses require fodder. Its people require bread. Its trades create remnants that must go somewhere. Its roofs break. Its gutters clog. Its walls weather. Nothing about urban life sustains itself without hands. A grand city seen from afar can appear permanent. Up close, permanence is labor repeated often enough that collapse is postponed. A man clears debris. A carpenter repairs timber. A servant fetches water. A baker rises in darkness. A watchman remains awake. A person replaces a damaged shutter. This is how walls continue standing. You find yourself walking south again, almost without deciding to. Not all the way toward the river. Only far enough for the streets to slope gently in that direction. The Thames announces itself, faintly through cooler air between buildings. Morning traffic has surely strengthened there by now. You hear a cart. Then the distant impression of voices associated with work nearer the waterfront. The river is reclaiming its daytime identity. Last night it belonged to darkness, current, mooring ropes, and occasional lantern reflections. This morning it belongs increasingly to movement, boats, goods wharves, people whose livelihoods depend upon water behaving as water always has. The tide will not wait for anyone to finish breakfast. You catch a glimpse through a lane, only a fragment, grey water under grey sky, a dark boat, timber along the waterfront, someone moving near it. No black abyss now, no mysterious reflection. The Thames has become visible enough to be practical, and still it is the same river you listen to under London Bridge. Perhaps daylight does not reveal the truth of things so much as one version of them. Night was not mistaken about the river. Morning is not more correct. One reveals immensity, the other usefulness. Both belong to the water. You remain where you are and watch the small portion of river for another moment. A bird passes across the opening. Its wings briefly catch the pale sky. Then buildings hide both bird and Thames again. You turn northward. The night's journey has begun folding inward upon itself now. Streets no longer lead you toward new darkness. They return you toward familiar places in changing light. Bread Street, Cheapside, Cornhill. Each name carries two images now, one wet and dim, one awake. A small market frontage near you is being stocked with food. Autumn remains present in what London can receive and eat. Seasonal produce enters the city through the rhythms of countryside and trade, while preserved foods allow households to stretch beyond what the immediate weather provides. A person lifts something from a basket. Another examines it. The exchange requires no commentary. Food always looks most ordinary when someone is actually hungry. You realize that you are tired. The sensation has been accumulating so slowly that it seemed part of the weather. Now, with London fully awake around you, your own body belongs strangely to the night that has gone. Your shoulders still remember the weight of soaked wool. Your shoes are damp. Your legs carry miles of stone, mud, bridge, lane, and road. People beginning their day pass you with the energy of people who slept while you walked. The contrast is almost dreamlike. Their morning is your late hour. A man opens his business. For you, it feels as though the day should already be ending. Perhaps every city contains people living at different positions within the same clock. Someone waking, someone finishing work, someone returning from prayer, someone beginning it, someone too ill to have slept, someone who has watched through the night and is about to be relieved. The sun, hidden somewhere above the clouds, does not synchronize human life as completely as it seems. You pass near two men whose night duty appears to be giving way to the day. There is no ceremony, no triumphant release, only the ordinary end of responsibility. Whatever darkness required from them is becoming less necessary as the streets fill. Their presence disappears into the crowd. That too seems appropriate. The night watch belongs most visibly to the hours when most others are absent. Morning makes watchfulness harder to notice because everyone is watching everything again. You continue toward Cheapside. By now, the market has nearly completed its transformation. The empty wet space you crossed hours ago is becoming crowded. More stalls, more goods, more voices. A horse complains softly as people move around it. Someone calls out. Coins change hands somewhere beyond your sight. Water is carried from the conduit. The Eleanor Cross stands amid all this activity, surrounded not by reverent silence but by the life of the city. You stop at the edge. For a moment you try to hear last night's rain beneath the morning noise. It is impossible, and yet you know it was here. Water ran where feet now stand. The stalls were closed. The market belonged to echoes. This is perhaps the gentlest thing about time. It does not need to destroy one world before creating another. It simply lays one moment over the previous one until the earlier moment can no longer be seen. But it remains somewhere in memory. A candle where there is now daylight, an empty street beneath a crowd, black water beneath a grey river. Sleep behind an open shutter, you turn away from the market and let the people flow past. There is still a little distance left to walk before the morning carries you completely out of this night. And above Cheapside, the clouds finally begin to lift just enough for the roofs of London to stand clear against a brighter sky. The brighter sky does not erase the night so much as carry it away gently. For a while, both seem to remain above Cheapside together. The clouds are pale now, their lower edges no longer merging with the roofs, and the market beneath them has become almost entirely a place of mourning. People move with purpose. Goods have returned to stalls. Water is carried. Horses pick their way through damp ground. Voices meet other voices until no single conversation belongs to the street for more than a moment. Yet the rain is still everywhere. It clings beneath the edges of roofs. It gathers in the deeper marks left by cart wheels. It darkens the timber beneath open shutters. A horse passes, and its hoof enters a puddle that has survived since midnight. Water rises around the hoof, falls, settles again. For an instant, the entire night is contained in that small disturbance. Then the horse moves on. You walk with the crowd for a little while. There is no longer any need to follow a particular road. The city itself carries you. At one frontage, Bread has been set out or moved onward from the work that began in darkness. At another, someone handles cloth while a customer watches. A servant disappears into a lane with water. An apprentice emerges carrying something that seems slightly too large for him and adjusts his grip without stopping. The ordinary day has arrived, and perhaps because of this, the night now feels farther away than the hours themselves could explain. You remember the first approach to Aldgate. Rain on wool, mud under wheels, the wall beneath a darkening sky. You remember not knowing what lay beyond the gate. Now the streets around you are familiar enough that their names carry sensations. Cornhill is wet timber and closing shops. Cheapside is a market emptying into rain, then filling again beneath grey morning. Bread Street is the slow descent toward colder air. Thames Street is fish, rope, warehouses, and the first sound of larger water. London Bridge is the deep movement beneath stone. Southwark is mud after rain, stable warmth, and houses disappearing into darkness. None of these places is contained by a single image. You encountered each more than once, and each time the hour had changed it. Perhaps a place can never be fully seen until time has passed through it. Daylight alone gives shape, night gives distance, rain gives texture, cold gives shelter meaning, silence gives sound its size, and morning reveals what had continued while you could not see. A man carrying bread passes close enough that its warmth seems almost imaginable through the cool air. The smell follows him. You let it. There is no reason to turn. The loaf will go somewhere, a household, a shop, a table. Hands will break it, someone hungry will eat. The journey of that bread began before dawn, while much of London was still closed behind shutters. Now it has entered the visible city. Many things do. The night prepares more of the day than the day remembers. At the edge of Cheapside, the great conduit draws people into another small pattern of movement. A vessel fills. Someone lifts it. Water travels away. Another person approaches. The rhythm requires no announcement. You watched rain fall freely for hours, yet here water is still gathered with care, because water in the right place has a different value from water everywhere. One person carries it toward a household where it will disappear into cooking, washing, drinking, or another ordinary need. Soon no one passing the street will know where that particular vessel of water went. The city continually consumes its own evidence. Bread becomes a meal. Fuel becomes smoke and ash. Candles become darkness. Water becomes countless unseen tasks. Days become memory. Perhaps that is why the smallest remains feel so precious. A worn threshold, a broken pot, a coin. A foundation beneath a later street. Stone remembers, because people cannot remember everything. But you do not need to think about ruins this morning. Nothing here believes itself ruined. The timber is alive beneath hands. The market is useful. The bridge is crossed. The cathedral and parish churches belong to the skyline people know. The walls still define the city. No one around you is standing inside an archaeological layer. They are simply standing on the ground. A bell begins to ring. Its voice is no longer lonely. Morning presses against it from every direction. Wheels, coals, birds, wooden shutters. The bell rises above them for a moment, then folds back into the city. You listen differently now. During the deepest hours, a bell seemed able to stretch across all of London. Here it is part of London, neither more nor less sacred for sharing the air with commerce. A woman near you pauses very briefly at the sound, perhaps only because she recognizes the hour or call. Then she continues. A merchant does not stop at all. A child turns toward the tower. 3 people. 1 bell. 3 different mornings. You move away from the market. A narrower street receives you, and the crowd loosens enough for your own footsteps to become audible again. The ground is still damp. Your shoes are still damp too, though after so many hours you hardly think of them. The cloak that once seemed unbearably heavy has begun to lose some of its moisture in the moving air. It is colder in places where the fabric no longer holds the warmth of your body so closely. You lift one edge slightly as you walk. Mud has marked the hem, a small record of the route. No one else would be able to read it. A splash from Aldgate looks no different from one collected in Southwark. The clothing remembers without explaining. Perhaps the body does the same. Your legs know the miles better than your mind. Your shoulders know the weight of the rain. Your hands remember the sudden warmth outside the alehouse. Your face remembers river wind. The senses keep their own history. You pass beneath an upper story where, in darkness, you might once have welcomed the shelter. Now the street beyond it is bright enough that the covered space seems merely shaded. Someone inside the building is already working. A repeated scraping sound reaches you. Then a tap. Pause. Another tap. The city's craftsmen have reclaimed the morning. Soon the countless trades hidden by darkness will make London noisy in their own ways. Metal, wood, leather, cloth, barrels, carts, voices. The city will become too loud for the memory of rain to survive on its surface. But that does not mean the night is gone. It waits inside things, in the bedding someone has just left, in embers revived from a fire banked hours earlier, in clothes still drying, in stable straw damp at the edges, in the watchman's fatigue, in the baker who has already worked while others are only beginning, and in people who will speak later of the weather. They may say that it rained through much of the night. Perhaps that is all. A sentence where you have spent hours. Human beings compress experience this way. A storm becomes weather. A journey becomes a road. A year becomes a date. A life becomes a name. Yet while experience is happening, it is never small. A single drop running beneath a hood is enough to occupy the whole world for 1 second. A warm doorway can become everything when you are cold. A lantern can seem bright when nothing else is visible. 1 bell across black water can make an entire city feel awake. You reach another opening where the southern sky can be glimpsed between buildings. The clouds have lifted farther. The light is still colorless, but more of it reaches the street. Somewhere beyond the roofs lies the Thames. You cannot see it from here. You know it is there. That knowledge has changed during the night. At first the river was something toward which you walked. Then something beside you. Then something beneath you. Then something between you and London. Now it is simply part of the city again. You do not need to return to it. The Thames can continue without being watched. Boats will move along it. Wharves will work. Tides will change. Water will pass between the piers of London Bridge with the same force you heard in darkness. The houses above it will fill with daytime voices. Someone will open a shop where, only hours ago, a candle disappeared behind a shutter. The place continues beyond attention. That may be the most peaceful thing a traveller can discover. A world does not vanish when you turn away from it. You continue east at an unhurried pace. The streets gradually lead once more toward the part of London where this night began. Aldgate is not yet visible, but the direction is familiar. People move toward you carrying the business of mourning deeper into the city. Others travel outward. The flow through the streets has no beginning you can identify. It simply exists. At a doorway, a child stands beside an older figure. Farther on, a dog lies in a patch of relatively dry ground beneath an overhang, watching feet pass without interest. A horse drinks. A shop sign no longer moves because the wind has fallen. Smoke rises more vertically between the roofs. For the first time all morning, the weather seems settled. The storm has spent itself, not dramatically. It simply has no more rain to give. You turn into one last quiet lane. The sound of the larger street softens behind you. For several moments, there are only your footsteps and the distant morning. You stop. A drop of water falls from a roof. One of the last, it lands beside you. The sound is so small that last night you would never have heard it beneath the rain. Now it is clear. A single drop after a storm. You look toward the pale sky above the narrow roofs. No stars remain. No moon ever appeared through the cloud. The night gave you no celestial spectacle. Only London. Perhaps that was enough stone, timber, water, smoke, bread, mud, candlelight, wet wool, cold hands, people closing doors, people opening them again. A city passing through darkness and continuing into morning. You begin walking once more. There is no final destination waiting ahead. Only another street, another doorway. Another bell that will ring later. Another loaf that will be baked tonight while tomorrow's London sleeps. By evening the clouds may change again. Someone will pull a shutter closed. A servant will carry a lamp across a yard. The Thames will darken. The bridge will become a line of small lights above rushing water. And perhaps rain will return on some other night. But this morning the roofs are beginning to dry. The market is awake. The river is moving, and London, having carried you quietly through the darkness, goes on without needing to say goodbye.